It is now 9:16 a.m. and our tech is ready. Would you record the meeting, Tom?
Yes.
Recording in progress.
Excellent. All right, so it is 9:16 a.m. on Sunday, December 7th. Thank you everyone for being here. I will call this special meeting of the Waterbury Selectboard to order. We do have a pretty straightforward agenda, but our first item of business is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion?
I so move. Oops.
Okay, we're going to motion by Tori, a second by Roger. Any further discussion on that? Right? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Next on the agenda, we just had to approve the minutes from our last meeting on December 1st. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Kane, second by Roger. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm going to abstain since I missed half of it.
All right, Tori abstained on the minutes. All right, next up, we have public comment. This is an opportunity to comment on anything that isn't on the agenda. Our item for the agenda today is continued review of the budget for next year, but if anyone would like to speak on something besides that, you're welcome to do so now, and we just ask that you keep it to 5 minutes, and then we can also look at putting things on a future item. Mike, go ahead.
Thanks to all the veterans out there on this day that will live in infamy. There are only 12 people from Pearl Harbor who are still living, and my thoughts go out to every veteran, and especially the families of those 12. Also, I want to be thankful locally to all the volunteers and everyone who made last night River of Light a very successful event. It's always, to me, it's one of the best things Waterbury does. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Anyone else who would like to speak on public comment? Yeah, come on up.
Hi, Joe Lumber at Waterbury Center. I'm disabled and I've been watching this meeting for years. I watched the meeting this morning and I couldn't tell you what any of you were saying. I don't know if you guys go back and watch some of these meetings, but you can't hear anything. It's all scrambled, it's all jumbled. But you watch Berlin, you watch anything else, and it's plain as day. So I don't know if there's something that we can do to improve the microphone system, maybe?
Yeah.
Are you watching on Orca?
Yeah. This morning's was really bad, and nothing against our great town manager, but I couldn't understand a thing you were saying.
Okay.
And I think it's vital that we be able to at least hear him, especially this time of the year.
Yeah.
And that's why I came today, so I could hear it myself.
Yeah.
So if you guys could do something about that, I'd highly appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for letting us know. Mike, yeah?
Just a comment. I know I can't comment on Orca, but when I listened back on it's recorded in the town thing,
Okay.
it sounds pretty good.
I listened to the one this morning, Mike, and I could not.
The one on the town website?
It was on, whatever channel it's on Xfinity.
Okay.
So,
Probably the Orca.
1085, I think is what it is.
Okay.
It was really bad this morning.
I'll text you.
Glad to-
and see if,
I just
Yeah.
bringing it up for people that watch it Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting us know.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I will say we've had comments about it before. I think a couple of us has joined virtually during the meeting and made comments, and that's sometimes okay. So we should check too if we might have a better recording they could use to help patch it up. So thanks for coming in. Sorry you had to travel. Any other public comments? All right. Well, then we will dive in now at 9:20 to our 9:15 item. As folks can see, this agenda item goes from 9:15 a.m. to 12:50 p.m. because that's what we scheduled this meeting for. I guess I'll just say as context setting, we started some of this conversation at our meeting on December 1st, specifically around the local option tax spending. So I think we're going to revisit that, but I know Tom has also had some opportunity to do some budget drafting. Also, just for context, to say that we have our regular meeting on December 15th, and we're going to be doing more budgeting review there. So again, knowing that this is one step in a long process, but we have a number of hours to dive into this, ask questions, move things forward, but again, still working towards a draft. Again, we have said that we are going to share this all with the public on January 10th, which is a Saturday, again in the morning, as well as January 12th for a budget review and input, having a full draft budget ahead of town meeting so folks can weigh in. That would be one opportunity to make changes, and then obviously there's town meeting as well for further review. Do other board members have things they want to add kind of before we jump in, just for context setting, or turning it over to Tom? All right, Tom, I will turn it over to you.
Sure. I think I'm going to start with the CDBG,
Okay.
since I think it helps us inform. So I heard last week, I didn't get a phone call, but I heard that folks were getting notified about the CDBG disaster relief grants. And again, I didn't get a phone call, but their website, they had a board meeting on the 20th, and the recommendation from the board was to fully fund the Woody Avenue project. And that's $299,985, which is what we put in. And then their second recommendation was to fund $2 million towards the Randall Meadow project. So again, haven't gotten that official call, but that's the recommendation as adopted by the board. So I think it's, we hope to get those numbers. Now, what was embedded in that, in both those numbers, were pretty substantial fees for consultants, and part of that is CDBG is HUD money, which is a lot of effort. So we tried to make sure that we had enough fees for essentially a consultant to do the project management and administration that goes with that. But we hope to get the official word soon, but nonetheless, pretty good news. We talked about the local option tax in Randall Meadow at the last meeting, and so I think we'll have to revisit that in a different context soon, in a better context.
Good.
So again, not official, but we're getting there.
And Tom, what would the Woody Avenue, how far would that advance that project?
So the purpose of the grant was to advance that project 100% to the bid stage. So that's still the intent. Once we're done with this grant, we put it out to bid and identify a developer.
So
I think-
the sewer would be done with this money, or?
No, not with this money, but this would give us a good opportunity to work with staff and the community to really upfront design what we want to see there.
Okay.
So there's a pretty significant community engagement component to this that we would be working with consultants on. So I think unlike Stanley Lawson, where we're putting out an RFQ, this would be an RFP that would say, here's the number of units, give us your best. And I also think, unlike Stanley Lawson, this is not likely to be something so big that there's a limited pool of bidders. I think there'd be a pretty wide pool of bidders on a project like this.
And we haven't determined yet whether it'd be just one project or could be divided.
But that's what the grant is for, to get us to the finish line there. And before I start on agency budgets, this budget is fundamentally different than the other three I've put together. So it's different on the revenue side. So the town gets a substantial slug of cash, a payment in lieu of taxes for the state property. in Waterbury for the buildings. There's a different pool of funding for state land. There's a different pool of funding for land in current use. That, that came in under budget in 2025, and the 2026 budget reflects an adjustment. And that pilot fund has been the subject of a lot of conversation with Vermont League of Cities and Towns and a lot with the legislature, and I'm really glad that I'm on VLCT's board right now and I can dig into it more. But the long and short of it is, there's a pilot fund funded through local option taxes. That pilot fund, last I saw fiscal year end, so this is not going back a full year, had a positive balance of over $10 million. So it's flush, the fund itself is flush with cash. The legislature appropriates an amount every year to be given to municipalities. It's based on the value of state property, but it's not the grand list value, it's the insurance values. And I think that makes sense, because if it was the grand list value, we'd all be trying to pump it up. But then the insurance value is adjusted for the common level of appraisal. So because our CLA is effectively going down as a percent of full value, so is the pilot payment. And I find that really disconcerting and also really interesting, because aside from a reappraisal year, your CLA always goes down. Always, as a matter of routine. And so it's a bit of an odd entity. And so I'm hearing from other towns that receive substantial pilots, of which there's 10 of us. Everyone's suffering in the same way. Everyone saw an underpayment this year compared to budget. Everyone is planning on what to do next year. So I'm hoping to, not hoping, I'm gonna reach out to our state delegates Monday, Tuesday with a detailed explanation of what's going on, to see if there's any potential to get some legislation in 2026 that might address what exactly is going on with the pilot. But everyone's CLA is moving in the same direction, so in essence, everyone has the same challenge right now. The legislative conversation last year was about the pilot fund, because it's funded through local option taxes, the portion the state keeps for the pilot fund. That was modified, the 30% that went to the state is now 25%, and there's still more than adequate funds to fund the pilot fund. So it's almost like the state, it's not almost like, the state is hanging on to municipal money. Our CLAs are going down, we're gonna get less. So I budgeted less than what we received this year by 5%. Part of that's based on the CLA, but also the pilot fund appropriation went up last year by $1 million overall. So our CLA is changing, but the total pot is going up. So hopefully there's some more change there in the future. You know, presumably we reappraise, and in 2 years our pilot payment goes through the roof.
Does that
Doesn't,
change the insurance though?
it's all based on the CLA. The insurance values, actually, last year went up a little bit for Waterbury, likely because of the armory, that they invested something in there. So it's an odd mechanism, and I'm hoping that there can be some better long-term change. I would argue that from every town's perspective, that level payments is just a better option for everyone. That way you've got some predictability. And I'm sure it's gonna be a topic of legislative conversation, because the municipal position through VLCT is that the pilot fund, the spigot should be opened up a little bit, one, because it's our money that the state is holding on to, generated by local option taxes. Two, it's now easier to pass a local option tax. You no longer need a charter, and several towns do it every year. It's just the trend, becoming really ubiquitous. And so I think the state is taking an overly conservative approach, and hopefully there's some change this session, but I'm not counting on it or budgeting for it at this time. I'm gonna keep digging into that issue more. I really just became aware of it in the last week. But that's a challenge that impacts the big picture in a big way.
That isn't offset by the increase in the amount that we get, the percentage that we get of the local option tax?
No, because that's, that's our money to do what the town wants with it.
Right.
And it will be more money. But unless you want to budget it towards a revenue loss, which is not consistent with the policy, so it wouldn't automatically offset it. But we certainly are going to get more in local option taxes next year.
Okay.
So that's the interesting background. And so as of this morning, and it's early in December, the tax rate would go up 2.25 pennies. $74.11 on a house valued at $200,000, and that's 4.05%. Again, that's as of December 7th, so pretty early in the process. But if that pilot fund were there, those numbers would be pretty substantially different. So that's one of the challenges at the start. And again, will learn a lot more as I go on. That's in general government, but before we get there, I'd like to start with Woody and Rachel, and that way they can head home, kind enough to come here on a Sunday morning. Want to start with Public Works? Woody, you want to come up?
Sure. Rachel was here first, though.
And since I was frantically written, I did not label it this morning, but in your big packet, 2, 3, 4. Public Works is page 9 in your big packet. The top line says Vermont Highway Aid.
In case the recording is bad, we're on page 9. The first line says Vermont Highway Aid, and it's posted on the town website. Right now, no one's online, so I'm just yelling at my computer by myself, but here we are.
And we've had some time to go through this, but I think there's a little more, I think in all of this, there's a little more work to be done for sure. But I think we're off to a pretty good start. On the revenue side, the Vermont Highway Aid is essentially a per mile aid that we get. It's going to be, unless something changes in the law, it's going to match last year. The actuals look bumpy because what's happened in prior years is that the state accelerated payments due to the floods. But 2026, I think, is very firm. And aside from that, we budgeted for some overweight permits, which is the bulk of other revenue. And in past years, we've had some FEMA revenue that we put into here and collected, and that's really based on administrative time to handle claims that we've collected. But that's all behind us, fortunately.
Of course. Why are we only at 64 this year?
I believe just a delay in payments. Those funds always take a while to get in. But that's all formulaic through the state. And again, the state legislature can cut that, but it's been more or less level funded for a long time. On the highway pay, first thing to notice is the actuals for 2025 will get adjusted at year end. It's because some of that pay goes to other departments. Essentially, we budget money in parks and rec and cemeteries, and move that around. But that's based on our head count now, and what that assumes is that we have a pending retirement, and so that assumes that we fill that position April 1st. And then the overtime, overtime is really driven in highway more so by mud season than by snow plowing. And past years, it's really been 60/40, 70/30 mud season driven. Hoping that gets managed a little better. We've put, gosh, 7,000-8,000 yards into Perry Hill this year.
Oh, at least, yeah.
So I know Perry Hill has always been a big problem, but the challenge in mud season that I know Woody and Celia are super sensitive to is that, nothing can ever be perfect, but the buses need to get through. It's one thing if they can't get up some of the feeder roads, but they try to make it so at least the main drags are passable, and then they do modified routes. But we feel like it's important to keep up with that as best we can. And I think the rest of the overtime, there's a good effort to manage. If there's an inch of snow, they're not necessarily gonna call the crew in super early. It's different from an inch from a foot.
Are you planning, I'm sure it's elsewhere in the budget, but are you planning to continue the additional graveling of the roads?
Yeah.
Stay ahead of the mud season to the extent possible?
Yeah. And then if you look at lines, really 23 down through about 29, 28, 29, it's all formulaic for the planned, for the planned retirement and new hire for the health insurance. I'm assuming that person takes a family plan, which is the most expensive, to be safe. And then going down a little bit more, really big number towards the bottom of the page, line 43, and that's vehicle and equipment maintenance. So that's the fleet, that's the backhoe, that's the grader, that's all those things, and that's 120 grand, which is, it's a meaningful increase over this year. And this year, as of this morning, we are not projected to go over budget, but I'm still arguing for the increase. One, because we've got 30 days left, and those bills are not typically $50. Those are thousands of dollars at a time. And much of that is planned. If we need a set of tires, for example, I forget the exact bill, but what were grader tires this year? 6-7 grand, I think, just for the tires. So some of those things are planned. But if we bust a plow in December, pretty big bills come with that. And so, am I being a little too conservative maybe, and could we pinch that a little bit? Maybe we could, but I'd rather make that.
Fix it if it's broke.
Gotta fix it if it's broke. I wanna make sure we're careful there, because we're simply, gotta fix it, we're not gonna delay it if we have to.
That line item has been escalating fairly significantly over the last, 3-4 years.
Yeah, I've got to.
Which item you on?
Is it because the fleet is aging?
No, I've got to adjust the actuals for 2022 and 2023 when I look at it. We used to budget it in two places, one for vehicle maintenance, one for equipment. So
Okay.
really 2022 and 3 are higher,
Yep.
but 24 is accurate.
Okay.
And this year we're over 100.
I have less of a problem, but looking at those 22 and 23 numbers, it kind of makes it look like we're getting higher and
Yeah,
higher.
I mean, they are certainly getting higher and higher.
We did lose our mechanic, so we pay a lot of labor in the vehicle
Yeah.
maintenance now.
And then
Point taken.
line 44 and 45 on gas and diesel. Again, we're under actuals, we're under budget for this year, and that's a good thing. We haven't paid all the bills for December yet, obviously we haven't experienced it, and some of that's gonna be driven by snow. If I had a crystal ball for where those fuel prices were going, I'd probably be retired by now. So I wanna be a little careful there. So, could we later in the process, especially when we have better December actuals, look at the tax rate and look at those 3 lines, which are $190,000 collectively, and if we need to pinch things? Yeah, maybe we could, but I don't want to start there. And then line 46, there's a substantial add. And department wanted double that. That is the expected cost to send one individual to CDL training. We still pay their wages while they're at the training, but that's essentially the tuition cost that comes with that. And from our experience recently in talking to other towns, I think our future is that a good percentage of our new hires are going to need to be CDL trained. There's just a dearth of people with that right now, and if they come with the CDL, great. But more and more the trend is you've got to home grow them a little bit, and so I expect that's going to be a regular feature of the budget.
How many trainings does 7,000 pay for?
This would be one individual. Yeah. And there's a question from the,
On that subject, Tom, I have a CDL, but point being is, I know it's hard to find kids who want to even do anything to do with the highway department. Are we gonna ask, if we pay this amount of money for tuition, are we gonna ask for a signed contract for 3 to 5 years? Or we can recoup our money from that?
yes, not quite 3 to 5 years, but yeah, that's something that we would do.
Thank you.
Yep. And then that line 47, Public Works Director, and I've got Public Works Director is in this budget in probably 5 places, and I've got to look at those formulas, and I haven't had time to do that, but there won't be major adjustments, but that's because our Public Works Director is an E-Fund employee, and so we bill respective portions of his time through this budget. In other places, we bill E-Fund for portions of other staff time. Line 49 is tree maintenance. I have an increase here, and then we'll get to it later, but I have a pretty substantial increase in trees in the cemetery budget. So Public Works, historically, their tree maintenance budget is not so much planting, but if you've got to take down a problem tree in the downtown. 2 came down in our downtown this year. Our Public Works Director, I don't know how he did it, but he was able to get Green Mountain Power to pay for one of them, so that saved us $4 grand.
Good job.
And the other one we paid for, and that's just the cost to bring down a big tree. We've got to trim it around the utilities. We also have a tree maintenance budget in the cemetery. Spent about $7,500 this year, and that's for the trees that came down in Hope Cemetery. So there is a couple components to trees. First is we always need to budget to take on a problem tree, and I think 1 is about our average. But one question to think about is, do we want to move some of this money from Public Works and just create a separate line item? Call it tree board, trees, something different. Public Works' focus is that they've got to take down a problem tree, it's got to come down. Their focus at times has been things like pruning and planting, but I really would argue it shouldn't be. And we've got a group of volunteers from the tree board. Public Works staff can do the work sometimes at their direction. But I feel like maybe we should think about putting it all in one place.
Does the tree board have its own budget?
They do not.
As I suggested at the LOT, does what's in today's budget take away, because my suggestion was last week that we wouldn't have an LOT fund for the trees, but put it in the working budget.
It's in the working budget has pretty substantial increase for trees overall. The LOT budget that I presented a few weeks ago had money specifically to the inventory they wanted to do.
Right.
Which is a one-time expense. So the money, I think pretty consistent with what they requested, is in the budget in total. If we want to think about
Not
moving it.
not including the inventory, though.
Right, that's LOT
Okay.
money. But if we want to think about restructuring and how it's presented,
I think it should be in the regular budget, not in the LOT. I always want to look at LOT as being big ticket, structural problems that we have in the municipality. And I'm not saying the inventory is not important, I think it is, but I think it should be part of our general budget.
yeah.
Well, your question, Tom, is should we be adding tree budget in the regular budget?
Yeah, should we call it tree department, just something separate,
Tree
whoever we want to
department.
think
Tree
about that.
department.
So it seems reasonable, based on high level of activity among the tree committee. And I can imagine that there are going to be recommendations coming out of this assessment that they do.
And then going down further, we made some pinching to some of those professional service lines. Because we thought we could based on the actuals, and just because we've got that revenue issue we're trying to overcome and have a reasonable tax rate. Want to talk a few minutes about salt.
Hold on one second, Tom. We lost that owl, and I'm sorry, I'm the only
Yep.
one who can see it. Da-da-da. This became red. I don't know why. Hello. Oh,
Yeah,
nope, I
salt's
think we
a
got
lot.
it.
Okay.
It's, my work one does it too. I don't know why. All right, we're back. Thank you.
So we have, this might be new for Tory, we adopted, the board adopted a salt policy a couple of years ago. And essentially the village is salt-free. Part of that was, I think, environmental, and part of that was financial. We don't have Waterbury specific data, but Friends of the Municipal has data about salt loads and watersheds in other places, so they really appreciated it. And I've, and the policy essentially says no salt, but operator discretion if there's an ice storm. For a typical snow, we leave it. And I think that's helped a lot to control costs. 2025, we're way under budget, but again, December is when it really starts.
They are using salt on the sidewalks.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think is a necessary evil sometimes.
The tree didn't like it.
And that's a lot less of
Certainly cheaper
an
than
impact than the roads.
Yeah.
And I'll just name, I'm letting us be informal because it is 9:50 a.m. on the morning, and I don't feel the need to call on everyone as chair. I do think we have to have only one person speaking at a time for the recording. So I'm happy to let board members and staff jump in as needed, but I'm just gonna note when 3 people talk at once, nothing will be recorded. Sorry.
It's okay. So despite the actuals for the last few years being really good, despite the first part of this year being really good, the per ton cost to buy salt's up 10%. And there's no savings from bulk buying. We've looked into that a bit and thought, could we just build more storage? And there's just no savings. Really, it is what it is. We basically get the state bid, which is the cheapest we're gonna get. So again, can we look at that and try to pinch it, and try to keep driving down that tax rate? Maybe we'll feel a little more comfortable if we get through this year. At the same time, if we get 3 inches of ice, we're gonna go through it like crazy. And I'm not likely to be the person to tell Bill Woodruff and Celia to skimp on it if we really need it.
Do you think we're gonna hit budget this year? Or is it?
I think time will tell. Just don't know, we don't quite know what what's gonna happen. I think it's good that, first of all, there's likely a few bills I haven't seen already for December, just filling the shed in the latest storms, but it's actually good that it's cold out. You know, we get those problems, we get the fluctuations, and we get the, you know, you don't tend to get ice when it's 10 or 15, you tend to get it when it's 28 or 32.
Right.
So I think it's actually good that we have a real start of our winter. So perhaps we'll be under a bit, but it's not gonna, we're not gonna end the year at, you know, at the 36 grand we're at now. Sand, we've had, I think we can level fund sand. We are right now full. And the Bolton pit opened, which had been closed for about a year. So that's good. That's not necessarily a per ton material savings, but that's certainly labor. That helps. And then something of note, gravel resurfacing. And so we haven't spent that this year, and that's proposed to be cut for next year. And that's because it's all part of the one gravel budget now. And in prior years, unless there was a special project, most of the gravel resurfacing budget was mud season gravel. But it's all really part of gravel resurfacing, and from my perspective, if you're putting gravel on the roads, you're putting gravel on the roads. No need to have it in a few different spots.
We are spending a lot of that money right now in stockpiling gravel, so.
Yeah, my instructions department was, we've got 150, let's spend it.
And are you proposing to redo certain parts of the road like you've done with Perry Hill this year?
Yeah, let me turn to Woody for that.
Yes, Celia has a list of priorities for gravel resurfacing. I believe Little River is on the list. Little River had a base course of some of the stuff that was crushed up from the state complex after Irene, you know, so that needs to be resurfaced. Portions of Greg Hill, and then some smaller portions of roads like Twin Peaks and, you know, maybe a little Maggie's Way and stuff like that. Yeah.
And then there's always things that pop up.
So we,
And that work is budgeted in here.
Tori had a question.
I'm confused. So you're combining the gravel and gravel resurfacing budgets, but they're both going down?
No, the total budget for gravel is 150.
And it would be in local option tax, right? Sorry, so just to specify, the reason it's not on this budget is because you have it as a local option tax expense, is that correct?
Correct.
Oh,
Okay, but so that's the why it's,
okay, thanks.
we're doing some moving from this budget to fund things with local option tax. So just to be clear about when we're doing that.
Got it.
Line 61, traffic control material. That is really signage and line striping. And we're under budget this year. And our 36 this year was pretty healthy compared to actuals. Nonetheless, draft version today, I'm proposing an increase, and that's because if I've learned one thing thus far through the Better Connections project, is that there's a real desire for just better signage and some better line striping. And that project, that grant funded project won't be done for some time next summer. But it'd be nice to have some budget on day one to implement some of the low-cost recommendations. You know, again, can we look at that later on in January and say, well, our actuals were lower? You know, get more precise? Yeah, we can. It's December 7th. But I'd like to start with some increase there, because from those walkthroughs, I really got a huge sense of just public demand for some of those improvements that are not necessarily hard to do.
And when they made that grant, there was some indication that that planning exercise would lead to potential additional grant from Agency of Transportation.
Yeah, I think it puts us in line for some additional funding. Oh, that's competitive and a few years away if we get it, I think.
I would just also add, speaking as a board member, I think we hear frequently from community members with traffic-related things. I will say I got a follow-up email about Winooski Street, and recognizing that we don't want to be doing haphazard planning, I would support an increase because I do think it's something that sometimes there is ad hoc things that pop up. So having money in the budget versus us needing to scramble to find it, to me, seems prudent in terms of planning.
Speeding on Winooski Street, or?
Yeah, so there had been like and some of that is probably a larger sidewalk and study. Again, I'm not saying we're going to solve these things overnight, but when I think about what we had folks come in, we had the boat launch, different things where I'm not saying money will solve all the problems, but I think it's a frequent thing that crops up each year. So having, again, in my mind, just funding for whatever an appropriate intervention is makes sense. Mike?
Are those temporary, traffic, speed signs, is that in that line item?
That would come out of there. But speaking of temporary, you raise a good point, and this is why Woody's here. One of the reasons. So neither here, nor the capital, nor the local option tax did I plan or did I throw in any money for additional speed bumps. I know it's been a topic of conversation. In the same way I'm arguing with you and defending some increases here, I've thought about this from a few perspectives. One, if we have better money for things like signage and line striping, I think some of those things help. Two, if there's more money for policing, I think that also helps. But three, Woody and Celia have essentially said, more speed bumps, off with your head. And so I'm not necessarily opposed to, it's about
One
$5
second,
grand.
sorry, I don't know what that bill is doing. Because Woody's really excited that we're doing this in a public meeting and recording it right now, so we gotta have it for posterity. All right, we're good, thank you.
To threaten with mortal combat.
That's right.
I say, it's Tom's word, we're not holding it against you, Woody.
I thought, if I may, that we had settled on like a series of temporary speed bumps that wouldn't interrupt plows during the wintertime. I thought that was the compromise that we had come to.
So we've talked about temporary speed bumps. We did certainly move the one out to Maple this year. It's not,
It woke people up.
it woke people up.
Certainly did.
Yep.
But also, what did I learn at Better Connections? Everyone learned the speed bump. And essentially what everyone told me in that neighborhood was, it's a nightmare of a speed bump if you go over it slow, but if you just drive the speed limit, whoop, you're over it. And that it worked for
On top of their springs?
a little bit. Maybe that's just the way people think. But it's not necessarily the labor cost of putting it in. You've got to put a few holes in the road. And so I am happy to add some money in here, whether it's operating, capital, LOT for speed bumps, but I want to give the Public Works Director his day in court to argue against it.
No, I just think it is a problem all over town. The one temporary one we have utilized, it's gone from Bidwell Lane to Maple Street to wherever. As Tom said, it's a little bit of a process to put them in. They all come with approach signs, warning signs, so it's not as simple as it seems. How effective it is on slowing traffic, it's hard to say without doing speed data at the same time that you have it in there pre, post. I think to Alyssa's point on future planning, a street like Winooski Street, where speed is, the residents will say that the speed is an issue. I think you look at the greater picture down the road and it might involve tree lining or narrowing the street or aspects like that might have a greater long-lasting effect. We put the one up on Little River and it was,
Oh, that was a monster.
years of trouble. And, there's gonna be people who drive fast, there always have been. Sitting behind me 30, 40 years ago, Chris and Joe were two of your worst culprits, not to point fingers at anybody. Because I've ridden with Joe. So that's mine. I think having one temporary one that we can utilize works good. I would hate to see a whole series of temporary speed bumps around.
But it's more than just the installation. It seems.
Yeah, I mean, some enforcement would be nice, obviously, that goes without saying. You know, it's a shame on a street like Maple Street that we have to put a speed bump to slow people. I mean, we spent, $100,000 to pave it nice and smooth, and, and that speed bump, while properly set and designed, I went up by there and there's a truck pulled over with a U-joint on the ground because he went a little, I mean, it did a little bit of damage that we didn't hear from people about, but it might have slowed them down.
Permanently.
Quick comment.
I see a question from Chris. Yep, go ahead.
There's been discussion about hiring sheriff part-time. I guess you'd have to monitor how that goes and whether or not the speed bumps would be necessary at that point, and that cost could go towards the sheriff as opposed to perhaps doing both. Because speed bumps may defeat the sheriff's purpose in many cases, Something to think about.
All that being said, we're under budget for 2025 in this line item, and we've got more room in 26. And so if you want us to buy a second speed bump, we can buy one using this year's funds and have it in place once the snow melts.
Okay.
My fear is that we, for the past 2 years, have talked about speed enforcement and traffic enforcement and police contracts and speed bumps. And we managed to get the one speed bump on Maple Street and then one on Bidwell for that last summer, was it last summer?
Yeah, same one.
Yeah. And now we've got the folks on Winooski Street saying that speeding has become an issue on their street as well. I think that out of all the discussions we've had over the past 2 years, the one thing that I've noticed that's been the biggest takeaway from 2 straight years of discussion was a temporary speed bump on Maple Street. And I think if we're gonna continue shelling out money for traffic enforcement or to slow traffic down, it's gotta work, or we're just flushing our money down the toilet. So if we're paying for cops, they gotta be where we need them to be. If we're paying for speed bumps, they gotta be where we need them to be, right? So, like, if we're proposing to increase our police spending budget, the folks who are, folks paying taxes for that are gonna wanna see exactly where the police are when they say they're gonna be there, or where the speed bumps are when they say they're gonna be there. I guess that's what I have to say about that.
Tori?
I feel like Maple Street's speeding problem is especially bad during foliage season. And then it sounds like Bidwell and Winooski might be different seasons of the year, or
I think
same?
on Bidwell, there were complaints of speeding and people think they're saving time by cutting the stoplight out of the equation. But what we did when we resurfaced Bidwell was, on the bookstore side, I pulled the parking stalls into the roadway a little bit that nobody really notices, but you probably do notice now. And that may have had I'm hoping it had the same effect of slowing traffic rather than utilizing the speed bump. We pulled the curb in, it makes that upper part of the road look all that much narrower. Mm-hmm. So it seems to have accomplished the same thing as the speed bump. Winooski Street's, for years have been the cutoff, so you don't have to go through town.
And on Bidwell, the delivery trucks can't pull in anymore, so they take up half the road. That really is very effective.
It is too, yeah.
That slows people down.
I guess that goes to a further point about spending on enforcement and speed bumps is, if all we have to do is paint the roads in a different pattern to slow traffic, it's going to be cheaper than paying for police contracts or buying speed bumps. So
I think there are places where it could work. I do think the one thing like the Maple Street speed bump, it was effective, I think, in slowing traffic right there, just up from the Municipal intersection.
Right.
But there's those people who know that right after you've hit that, there is no more speed bump so they, after having slowed to 5 miles an hour, they jumped to 45 miles an hour.
Right.
And the fact that a sheriff or speed patrol could be movable essentially.
Right.
And I'll just note to your point, Kane, I mean, we had law enforcement in here and they talked about the triangle of ways you can do things, right? It's design, it's enforcement, and I'm gonna get the wrong one, but I think to note that Better Connections is a Waterbury Center specific study looking at, again, design, painting, whatnot. I'm here in support for the increase in money for painting or things like that.
Yeah.
And then I think we've been very clear about law enforcement desires and the challenges for that, and
Right,
are
and-
potentially
and-
proposing it.
Correct, which is, I guess, the argument I'm trying to make is, I don't wanna be increasing budgets if the problem is going to continue. So if we know the solutions to the problems, and the law enforcement solution is shaky because of their staffing problems at all the departments, then we should be doing the other two things, like, as soon as we can. So we should be spending our money where it's working, not where it's not working, is the argument I'm trying to make.
Thanks. And I will say, Joe has.
And I would have to agree with Kane. I live on Municipal, and I'm telling you, it's a racetrack at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's out of control. I've almost been hit numerous times in the last 2 months backing out of my driveway. And I live right before you go over the dip. Now, I look out, I can see all the way down to the bridge. And when I have a car just about going through the back of my truck before I get to my neighbor's house, you know the speed that car was on. And as far as the police department, the state police, I feel no necessity why they sit down here in front of this village fire station. All of us go through town. If you can do 15 miles an hour on an average day, you're doing really good. And why are they sitting in front of the fire station in Waterbury Center? You can see them for miles. I mean, I think, I agree with Kane. If we're gonna pay the police department for enforcement, do it. Don't sit in front of the fire station, you know, and do nothing. There's places that they could hide in the park, 20 feet down by Kane's house. They could hide in there, nail them every time. Get a couple stop signs. I just don't see them in Waterbury Center. If I do, they're in front of the fire station. They don't go by my house. I'm home most of the day. I don't see them. But I think, I agree. If we're gonna, let's go one way or let's go the other way. That fire cover, or that police coverage is costing us a lot of money.
Tom, do you have other things for highway here, or do you want to look at capital while Woody's here? And Woody, I want to give you more time if you have other thoughts, wishes, desires to share with the board while you're here.
Oh wait, sorry, before we move away from this, can you just explain really quick to me the difference between tuition and training?
So tuition is specific to the CDL,
Right,
and training is any other training they might get. I don't know, Woody, if you can talk about.
Yeah, there's an occasional training if one of the crew wants to learn to weld better or something like that, they might take a welding course through Vermont Roads program, something like that.
okay, thanks.
And that the capital fund, I didn't print and put in your packet, but I want to fine tune that a little bit with Woody, but I want to say that the transfer to the capital fund proposes to fully fund the paving that we talked about, part of capital plan earlier in the year, along with some other priorities. And then the thinking on capital is 2027 would likely be a big year, because that'd be the start of Guptill Road. So when you see the capital fund, you'll see the paving budget with the major roads, the railroad side of Park Row, Barnesville, and then, what was the other one, Woody? The curve, Newland Flats
Yeah,
curve.
extension of Newland.
And then, pretty substantial slug of funding in the capital fund too, that would be, to hire a contractor in advance of doing Newland Flats. We'd hire a contractor to replace culverts, because they're beyond our ability to reach, need a bigger machine. Sorry, Guptill.
I was sorry, I thought we just did.
So that's what we're anticipating in the capital fund, we just gotta fine tune some of those numbers, but that transfer, I think, is gonna hold.
What's highway unclassified?
It's just any little thing that we occasionally run into that doesn't fit neatly into a bucket.
Miscellaneous.
What?
Miscellaneous.
Well,
Yeah.
no.
So we try to keep unclassified minimal, and then try to, if something happens on unclassified for 2 years straight, that's more than a few bucks, then we try to make it its own line item. To try to keep that limited, but, little tiny stuff in general.
Tom, can you speak to the highway existing debt in this budget? I'm recalling that we have some that's in local option tax finance there. I assume this is separate and still holds over?
So, none of it's in local option tax for highway existing debt. There was a reduction last year from a few departments, highway being one of them, where local option tax killed some debt for the long term. But primarily that was actually a fire impact.
Didn't we purchase a new vehicle and finance it
Yes,
with local option
sorry,
tax?
sorry.
So I'm saying, I know in some cases we've used local option tax for
Yes.
debt. I guess I'm curious, what is this 100,000 still paying off? And is that anything we look at?
That's paying off a bunch of stuff. Give me a second here.
Good question, Melissa.
Yeah, go ahead.
Culvert work on Guptill Road, prior to the paving, would you also finish up the necessary bridge work? Is that in the picture or not? Before paving?
Before paving, yes. First focus was, there's, I think, 15 culverts, 13 of which probably could be changed out. The hope was to give them at least, hopefully, 2 seasons to compact. So tackle hopefully all of them this year, maybe half of them this year and half next, but yeah, that would be the goal.
And what bridges are on the schedule?
Nothing's on it for this year, bridge work wise, but there'd be bridge work possibly on, the numbers don't make sense on Guptill Road. But
I know.
yeah.
But that one out right near Chris's driveway?
Yes, yeah, there, and
The one by the cabin, right?
yes, there's always some bridge work to be
The
done.
one in front of your driveway and then the one down the way,
By
closer
Greniers?
closer to me, yeah, by Greniers.
That one was done a little while ago.
Then the one
Yeah.
in between those two.
Yeah. So,
by the cabin.
And so just to touch on the debt, Alyssa,
Thank you.
so before we had the local option tax, I believe it was 2023, there was a highway truck approved. So that loan is through Union Bank. That's about $35,000 a year. 2029 is the last year. So to use local option taxes to pay that off, you'd need 120 grand. Reduce your budget by about 35 next year. There was a 15-year bond issued in 2021, last year's 2036. That is about $85,000 a year, and that was for a number of things. So the highway department pays 29.7% of that bond. There is a paving bond that was issued in 2016. That is $50,000 plus $1,200 interest. 2026 is the last year, so your 2027 budget has an automatic debt reduction of about 50 grand, which will be nice. But in general, the highway debt in here really pertains to the 15-year bond, which doesn't go away until 2036, and then the truck that was through Union Bank that was before the local option tax. On the local option tax budget, there was another truck approved town meeting day last year and purchased, and we have the chassis, not the body yet, I believe. And that was approved by the voters for $310,000, paid off over 3 years. So that's in the local option tax budget. So you'd be that much higher without the local option tax.
Can you say the 2023 highway truck, that's $35,000 a year, paid off through 120K, 85,000, and we're paying a portion of that? That funded it
Highway
over?
pays 29.7%. Yep.
Paving bond, that's gonna be paid off next year, and then I missed after that. Highway.
And then after that, there's the truck through the local option tax.
Okay, which, to your point, is not reflected in this budget, but
Right.
it's there, thank you.
Yeah, so unfortunately, there's no debt where we can easily on the highway side say, hey, there's not a ton left, let's use a little LOT surplus and cut it out of the budget. But I'm hopeful that things like financing a truck through a local bank might not be necessary going forward, at least as necessary as they were before.
Thank you.
And the paving bond issued in 2010, or 2016, I don't know what road that was for,
I'm trying to think.
but it was $500,000 in principal. Others might know better, but
Here you go.
I just call it the 2016 paving bond.
Okay.
Here you go, I believe.
Board members have questions for Tom? I was gonna say, again, Woody, appreciate you being here, and I'm curious, just in general, other things, well, recognizing I'm having you sit here in a public meeting in front of Tom and saying anything you really wanted that didn't get in, but I still want to give you the platform to say, are there priorities you feel like either looking to next year for 2026 or kind of long-term vision for the board, you as Public Works Director think we should be aware of?
Nothing's coming to mind right now. I am looking forward to a summer where we're not doing, or where some major construction is not happening around Waterbury. I'm thinking the Little River Bridge happens a year out, but, yeah, I think we're doing pretty well. It'll be a question of, I would just, one thing that worries me is if this whole Stanley Lawson thing in the cornfield down there goes through and hundreds of thousands of yards of material have to be trucked away. I'm really worried about the impact it has on Main Street. You know, Main Street was a $22 million project, and it's got a good road base, and it's got 8.5, 9 inches of asphalt, but when you're trucking that amount of material, it's just, I think there will be impacts from a big project like that that might not necessarily be seen right off the bat, but we might pay the price for later.
Might we suggest trucking up the other side of the field over the bridge and then down?
The shorter version,
Yeah.
yeah, but even that it'd have a shorter impact, but yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Transfer the impact to Duxbury?
Yeah.
That's okay.
Are there preventative things, or you're more saying that would be a down-the-road need for sooner maintenance than you would have otherwise planned? Or-
Yeah, it'd be much sooner
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
planned, yeah.
And we did budget for money in the grants we've applied for to pave Park Row,
Yeah.
but just thought, based on conversations with the funders, that putting money in for Main Street was too much of a hill to climb. We've talked a lot too about putting in money for some sort of, big mechanized saw attachment to trim brush better. And just haven't quite found the right attachment that fits our equipment that would really give us the kind of the reach and the safety we want. And that wouldn't be huge, they're 10, 15 grand. Just haven't quite got there yet.
What do they do on the side of highways? They like pull the mower up and like put it sideways?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but that-
I mean, it's not pretty, but
Right.
yeah, but it works.
Yeah, and the complaints we get are people that own big trucks. It's not an issue for me and my Corolla, but people that own big trucks hit the branches and the brush. But when we use our mower, and I think it's 3-4 inches it can handle, You can go up the sides of cedar trees, things like that. We certainly get our share of complaints from folks when we trim their trees in our right of way.
And we did have this discussion with Tom. I don't think we put any sidewalk improvements in this year, but I don't think that's something you want to keep leaving out.
What's on the list?
Well, we still have some sidewalks that are 4-footers, which are, doesn't even fit our sidewalk plow.
Plow, right?
So first list would be to at least make sure everything in town's a 5-footer. And so that would be Wallace Street, portions of North Main Street.
Definitely High Street, right?
High Street's an S, yes, yeah. So, again, I'm not opposed to leaving it out this year. I think that's all right, but I don't think it's something we want to keep leaving out.
And it is conceivable that sidewalks are gonna be one of the proposals coming out of the Better Connections grant up in Waterbury Center. Do you have the equipment to plow those?
No, well, no, it's not, and it's, the sidewalk plow resides down here in the winter because that's where the sidewalks are. So that would be troublesome. Yeah. How that would be tackled, I don't know.
Somebody else's problem.
Okay. Well, for those of us who live up there. Yeah.
And then the sidewalk numbers I received from Bill, so Wallace, North Main, High Street, Upper Stowe Street, anywhere from $65 a foot to $130, depending on how much labor we use versus contract out. We've got a crew that has some experience doing sidewalks, and there are towns that, there are towns in Vermont where they'll take an experienced, 4-person and hire a summer crew and pour their own. And just go block by block. If you contract it out, you don't want to do just High Street. You want to do it all at one shot, and you'll get better pricing per foot. Contractor's going to want to come in and just do sidewalks for the summer. So when I think of sidewalks, I think about, one, finishing Better Connections. I think about maybe getting some clarity on High Street. Sorry, not on High Street, on Woody Ave. And maybe that informs
Is there a
maybe the
sidewalk
future of
over
Woody
there?
Avenue.
No, but,
There should be.
no, but to Tom's point, I think we discussed High Street because it's a mess. But if something's happening on Woody Ave, there's probably, if you're putting, you're gonna have to put a sidewalk to
Right.
connect it to High Street.
Right, if we're putting
And-
pipes underneath, we might as well do the sidewalks while we're
Yeah.
putting the road back together.
Yeah, and
But when I think of sidewalks, the upper estimate for that expense is 1.6 million, so I think that's at some point a bond conversation. And I think if we hired a crew, our own crew to do it, other towns do it, certainly possible, but it's gonna take a long time to do versus just contracting anything out. They'd wanna do it in 1 or 2 summers, I'm thinking.
Is that where, when you said between 65 and 135, was it?
A foot,
A foot, right, I know.
Yeah.
Is that the difference, like at 65 would be with, if we would have like a foreman with, a hired crew?
yeah, so some of that staff would come from our other spots in our budget, but, so I think of it more as a 130.
Okay.
Was that the way we did it with Randall Street?
Randall Street, we did all the sub-base and everything. We hired strictly somebody to pour the concrete and
concrete, right.
finish it. Yes.
Was that more efficient?
They're better, obviously better at finishing concrete than we are.
Yeah.
And it's easy, you can find a couple different concrete contractors to do that part, and that's easy enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that worked well.
And you put down the foam, does that represent a significant increase in costs, or is that?
That adds up, depending how deep you go with your base, that adds up. Whether you have to have curb or not, that adds up. At some point, you should probably have that discussion as to granite curbing versus concrete. That's a big cost difference, but somewhere down the line, I can point to concrete curbing breaking apart everywhere, but very little granite curbing breaking apart.
Yeah, that's pretty tough stuff.
Yeah, one second. I have one question too. I'm hearing the package, the the benefit in if we're gonna bid it out or bond for doing it all at once. I'm curious from either hand, is there something small that would be more manageable, take on our own, or is it really, even for our crew, not worth it to do a smaller? I'm hearing the waiting, and I guess I'm thinking about the, we often say, we'll do it in the future, do it in the future, you know, is there something smaller that would be worthwhile to do on the sooner side of any of this?
Yeah, I mean, our crew could certainly do like Wallace in North Main and get them up to the 5-foot standards. Wallace is an easy one, no curbing involved, it's all straight, no engineering. And so things like that, then it just becomes a question of, you know, if we have 3 of our highway crew doing that, they're not doing other things.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally, understood. But in theory, there is portions
Well,
that could be.
absolutely, yeah. They couldn't tackle, you know, thousands of feet, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Woody, from what I'm hearing from friends who are in the contracting business, that concrete guys are really kind of backed up and hard
Oh, yeah.
to get.
Yeah.
So would that impact what your work would be?
Yeah, I mean, if we were to do like Wallace, you know, you gotta schedule ahead of time, and the concrete guy's gonna want a certain amount of footage before he will even show up. And,
Okay.
Yeah, a little more difficult to get ironed out. I know like at 51 South Main, where they had ripped up just a small portion of that stamped concrete, it took them months and months and months
To get the guys to come, yeah.
Yeah, I think if you do a bond, whether your bond vote's at town meeting day or some other time, you bid it out over the winter.
Right, so you could schedule people out.
Yeah, and I think the contractors are gonna wanna say, hey, we're gonna do
We want
X thousands of feet
We want
this year.
commitment.
Chris, you had a question?
Couple comments. Pete Delphia used to be a contractor back years ago, Delphia Construction. He loved doing sidewalks because it was one of the more lucrative parts of the concrete business. So there is, you know, there is a desire to do that if you can come up with the right footage to bring a contract, especially like you said, they're backed up the way they are. To your point about foam, it is an upfront cost, additional cost, but I'm curious to know with the sidewalks that we've done, Woody, how are those reacting to that application? And I'm interested in the life expectancy added to that sidewalk with foam, and the need to have to redo it again versus without. And then the movement, from what I understand from some of the highway guys that are running those plows, they prefer to have the foam as opposed to not, because you're not seeing that separation in the sidewalk.
They don't move.
What's that?
They don't move.
Yeah, yeah. So those are the things you need to
But
take into
our
consideration.
neighbor's driveway cracked.
Yes, yeah,
I don't know what they're running through there.
yeah.
Crack
That was a
road.
bad one. What did they run through there is my question.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Neighbor, girlfriend has a
Yeah.
boyfriend with a big pickup truck, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, to your point, Chris, I don't know what the long-term, how it's gonna stack up long-term. Haven't seen any movement on any of the stuff that has foam under it, with the exception, I know there is one place on Randall Street where either a garbage truck or something big
Yeah, correct.
got that one bad. But overall, the 2,000 feet on Randall held up very well. I think it seems like the problem isn't coming from below now, it might be coming from above. You know,
Salt degradation.
salt and stuff like that, and yeah. So, long-term, how it compares, because I know a street like Stowe Street across Tannery Flats up there, that does not have foam under it. That's holding up pretty well. We had a storm drain blow out some stuff, but that project's, what now, 15 years in or so. Yeah, so I think it can be done both ways and work both ways. I do think having a transition where the foam meets a non-foam area, that creates a little bit of an issue, and as well as on some driveways, we've noticed on Randall, as Roger pointed out, the sidewalk's not moving, but everything else is. The residents' driveways and what have you, so it creates a little bit of a transition bump there, particularly in one that just won't go away, yeah.
Have they come after the town for that problem?
Yeah, it was on my list to do this year again, and, promised him, and, you know, we haven't got there yet. The year's not over, but I don't think we're getting there. Yeah, some driveways seem to really go crazy and some not so bad. I don't know how bad, does yours?
I have 18 inches of gravel under mine, and so it's
Yeah.
pretty calm.
Yeah.
But others move around a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, there is one on Randall Street where they can't get their vehicles in on some winters, some winters are not, so.
Yeah, it all depends on
Depends on
how
the frost.
what the frost heaves are doing that year.
All right, notes aside, do we have other highway things from Tom or Woody that we want to highlight or flag for the board, or things board members say, whoa, we really got to revisit this as a future meeting that we should flag? Obviously knowing we're going to keep refining and coming back to this, but is there anything people want to know? Yep, Joe.
I just got one question. New equipment for the highway. Does that include lawnmowers and trucks and?
No, that'll all be on the capital side, so we're not We're not planning to buy any new heavy equipment this year.
Yeah.
We had a pretty good budget in parks this year, so we bought a small fleet of mowers. We actually had bad luck with commercial mowers. They didn't last us any longer than, in terms, number of hours you'd expect from a residential mower, so we just bought sort of high-end residential zero turns, maybe one used commercial. But we just thought, why spend 15K in a commercial mower when you're not getting the hours out of it? This is more just small stuff that might break in the garage.
One last question, Alyssa.
Yep.
Not to sound like Chris, but maybe we should be considering other roads to limit salt use on if salt is coming up substantially in price.
So, the few comments, so the first is, we want to be careful not to take away operator discretion. Because they're the ones out there at 4 AM plowing. If they see a vehicle struggling to get up a hill, they're gonna have to use some of their judgment. So I think we can never just say never on it. I guess my question is, let's be real specific. I think it's hard for the operators, again, put yourself in their shoes. It's, there's a good storm. 4 AM is pretty normal to start. It's hard to expect precision. So if someone does the village route, they can kind of know, stay off the salt. But if they're in Waterbury Center and we say, hey, Maple Street's a straight shot, pretty flat, let's leave it alone. It's just harder to remember at 4 AM to turn the chute on and off sometimes. So we'll expect more, even if there's a policy, you'll probably expect a little more of that. And every operator's got a story where they forgot and they just left the chute wide open when they finished their route and drove back to the garage and were empty, right? That happens. So I guess I struggle a little bit to think of additional roads outside the village that would really be suitable. I'm really open to ideas. Maple's flat.
Gupto's flat.
Nealon's flat.
Gupto's got some turns and some hills.
Sure does.
I'm not opposed to it, but I don't have the expertise to make a recommendation here. I really don't. I want to be clear about that.
I think we could look at the list we have. We have had some changes in who's driving which route to guarantee. Let's make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And revisit the list. I mean, Gupto gets a lot of traffic. It should be salted. And the hill on Nealon for sure. I think we hit the low hanging fruit before. Maybe it's time to look at a little further. I mean, the Ice Center Road, not salting that's a long stretch. That probably makes a difference now. We can look at the list and bring it back to you and see what everybody wants.
Thank
Yeah.
Any other notes from anyone?
I guess just the question there is, I guess maybe not the question, the statement is, unless that list is pretty substantial, I'm not sure the budget moves a whole lot.
No, I don't think the budget moves at all, honestly, but we might be doing good for the environment, and we might be, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if we don't solve Sunset Drive, in the end, it doesn't save us anything, but we might be saving our portion of the world.
Other things on this? All right, thanks to all.
All right.
Special thanks to you, Woody, for being here on a Sunday morning, being along for the board and manager Sunday fun session.
Remember that clock is on.
Thank you, we have in fact heard that. We don't know why.
I don't know. Reach up there and grab it.
We might do ladders later. All right,
Well, we all need something else.
Tom, do we say library while Rachel's here?
Yep, with the caveat that Rachel and I haven't met yet, and the library board hasn't met yet, so we're trying
Great.
to,
We talked briefly yesterday, so
Get
there's a
it,
little bit of a plan.
trying to get a start, to get a sense of the whole.
Last page.
Last page, that's good.
So note for anyone watching this recording, it's the last page of the draft 12/7/25, and we're noting explicitly that the library director and the library commissioners have not reviewed this yet, so we are in preliminary stages.
Yeah, preliminary stages. Couple of things on the revenue side, I just want to note. Duxbury just really reflects the actual. Duxbury used to be no different than anyone else in terms of non-residents paying. A few years ago, they implemented a policy in Duxbury that says if you pay the non-resident fee, come to town hall and we'll reimburse you. And I think the staff at town hall had enough of that after a while and said, let's just pay Waterbury a straight fee. And that works out.
They gave us more than we asked for?
No, I ended up asking for a bit more than anticipated, and they did give us that, so that was great, and hopefully
Love
that
those people.
will continue to trend in that direction.
I think we should ask Duxbury every year for the same increase. We ask people in our own taxes here.
That's a good idea.
I think that's quite fair. On line 6, the rent for building and grounds, I think there's rent in the budget in a few spots, and some of it belongs here. It's just likely an accounting issue, and Rachel and I started to go through that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I suspect some of the steel room rent should go to the library.
That might be true.
Because I know you're getting more than $100 for your
Yeah,
rooms.
definitely.
Because they're always rented.
Yes.
We always have a series of other fees budgeted, and we always have donations budgeted, and that's because the Friends are instrumental in helping out, and so the Friends, in essence, is offset by purchases by donation. So there's 12,000 in revenue and 12,000 in expenses, but that's testament to what they're able to do each year, because that's really consistent, 10, 12, 15 grand coming from the Friends each year, which is great. And then I'm not proposing a change in the trust fund money for the library. The town's investment funds, the library has a substantial trust. There's a tax stabilization from the town with over $1 million in it. There's a cemetery fund, over $450, $500 in there. There's they call it the C.C. Fisher Fund for the fire. There's another investment fund, about $150, and that's for the veterans monuments. All of our investment funds have done really well this year. The market's just roared. Library's no different. That fund, when I started, was 600 grand, and now I think it's 750, 800.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of cash in it. And I think the library board conversations have kind of mimicked mine with the investment advisor, which is we're likely thinking that since corporate bonds are safer, and right now bonds and CDs are 5.5%, we're likely to just consolidate some of our gains in the market and switch the investments to be a little bit more bond heavy, CD heavy, just to maybe ride out the storm, because it really does feel like there's some uncertainty out there. On the other hand, the investment advisor always tells me, Tom, you're not investing like you're 65, you're investing like you're 20. These investments will be here for the long, long term, so there's a little bit of a push-pull there. So I'm not proposing I'm gonna go 90-10 on fixed income, but maybe 60-40. Anyway, on the pay side for the library, I'm including everyone we have now. There's a vacancy. Assuming that vacancy is filled 1/1, so there's no need to hold off on that. Based on pay and hours, and then a small bump in the part-time pay, and the part-timers give the full-timers some flexibility in their lives, which I think really is helpful to them. I think especially around things like closing and weekend hours. And then the benefits are the benefits. Again, just based on actuals and the head counts. A couple big numbers in the library to focus on. So the Municipal Building Operating Fund, there's a formula. It's roughly 55% library, 45% town hall, and it's based on square footage, but Municipal Building Operating Fund is in here in a different section, but that's all the cost to maintain this building. So that's around 130, the library pays their share. And then at the bottom, line 42, that's the library's share of debt for town hall, which is around 200 in total. So those are pretty big numbers that drive the library budget. For books, I tentatively put in there a $1,500 increase, which is about 5%. Now that's not just books. Much of that is the online collection that's available to people. And the actual right now is well below budget, but Rachel is really good at working with me and eliminating expenses where she can. And then in December, we generally say, all right, you can move on some of the collections. And that's really helpful, because if there's ever a major problem with the whole, we can hold off where we need to. So I think I've given reasonable increases in some of those items that are important to, that I hope will be important to Rachel and the commissioners. That being said, we haven't had time to vet, so we're starting now in real time.
What's LB purchased by donation?
What items get purchased, you mean, or what?
Like,
Yeah,
I guess why is it an expense if it's by donation?
That's just to track what purchases we are making with that Friends money in a separate way so that we know what items those are. The Friends tend to support some of our digital services. They support some items for children's programming, kind of any special requests that we make. I'm working with them right now actually to purchase some replacement furniture. So we're very fortunate. We have a really active Friends group who have a lot of money that they've received from annual appeal and from book sales and things like that. So when there's a kind of an unexpected project or something that's outside of the budget, like purchasing some new furniture, they can fund those projects.
Okay, cool.
And the amount matches what we're anticipating in revenue.
Yeah, it generally, we do get some unexpected donations as well, so you'll probably see the donation number be a little higher than the purchase by donation number.
Okay.
And is that tracked separately so that they know how much is in the Friends budget and
Yeah,
spend
the
towards that?
Friends, yeah, the Friends have their own separate budget where they're tracking specific expenses, and I track it in my own spreadsheets as well, so there's a real clear breakdown of exactly what gets spent that way.
Questions, other questions from board members, Mike?
I know we have approved, the security system, key card, stuff like that. Is the library involved in that as well? And
Yeah.
do they pay a percent of
So
that cost?
that's in a municipal building operated fund. The voters approved some funding this year. Woody's working with vendors on quotes and trying to iron out that system. So money's been approved by the voters. We're moving
Right.
on it pretty soon. It's a matter of fine tuning what we can afford, what exactly we can do.
So the library basically pays that through the operating,
That's LOT money,
LLD?
yeah.
Kane?
Can you just walk me through this reduction in computer services?
Yeah, so we've been pretty reliant on Bob Butler for computer service, but I actually have an internal employee, Kyle Creason, who is our kind of on-site tech support. He's our technology librarian. He does a lot of one-on-one tech help with the public, but increasingly I've been having him do the maintenance of our public computers, updates on those, as opposed to bringing Bob in for those. So it's been a nice way to save a little bit of money there, and it also means it's on the spot as opposed to having to book Bob, so it's worked out really well.
What I will say in general is, Bob gives us, I think, a really good service for the money we spend on Bob. And I think when Bob is no longer interested in providing services to Waterbury, we have a $30,000 to $50,000 net increase in the budget that year. Because there's not a lot of small businesses like him that will give you this sort of service. And I'll give you an example. I had a couple of website issues yesterday and an issue with an eFUD email account, and so Bob and I spent, a few minutes on the phone and 45 minutes texting. I'll guarantee I won't see a bill for that. That's just not how Bob operates.
Other questions? I guess, Rachel, I'd ask the same thing I asked to Woody, which is just around, knowing it's preliminary, is there any things like hopes, dreams, desires you want on our radar, either for this year or looking into the future?
Honestly, the biggest thing is the project I'm working on with a friends to replace some furniture. The building's getting close to 10 years old. All that furniture was purchased at the time the building was built. Much of it has held up incredibly well, so I'm actually going to replace the furniture from the same company we bought it from, Office Environments out of South Burlington. But some of it you can see some real wear and tear, especially in the children's department, and then just things break over time. So that's my big project, and that funding is going to come through the Friends. So no worries there. Beyond that, we'll see what comes next. Tom and I have been talking a lot about some ideas for collaboration with the rec department when their new rec director comes in. So I think that's gonna be an interesting area to explore, though too soon to say any specifics around it.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from the board or public on this early library review?
Just a quick, do you recall, I'll put you on the spot, what are your total annual visits?
Oh gosh, I just looked at this number. Did anyone see the Waterbury Wrapped on Instagram?
I didn't click through. I saw that it existed, but I didn't click through.
I just looked at this number, but I'm hesitant to make a guess off the top of my head. But I will say, it's up on Instagram right now. Take a look at our Waterbury Wrapped, and we've got it shows our annual visits to date, so not counting December. It shows our top 5 programs in both the adult and children's area and our top circulating items. So, and the number of people in total who attended all programs. And it was impressive numbers, but again.
So they had 604 programs this year with a total of 8,579 attendees.
How do you track visits? Like, for instance, I understand if they come up to a librarian, you probably have some sort of a score sheet, but someone who just comes and,
Yep.
fumbles around the library for whatever information, how do you track that?
We have a door counter, so we know exactly
Oh, okay.
who's coming in and out of both of our doors. People check out items and so door counter just tracks.
That's what I was gonna think, the one you have by your end, I didn't know if the main door
It's at
here.
both doors. Yeah, it's actually at the doors to the library specifically, so
Oh,
not
that
the main
one,
door
okay.
here. Then circulations we track through our integrated library system. Program attendance, we have to do manually, so we
Right.
stand there with a little clicker. Last night, we had 119
You had a lot of people here last night.
in the library during River of Light, so that was really amazing. Yeah, that was a great night.
And I'll put you on the spot.
Okay.
So you
Okay.
do book deliveries to seniors.
Yes.
Have you ever thought about perhaps using that trust fund and maybe having a bigger formalized bookmobile style program?
We have Definitely, that's something I would love to talk about, or what a lot of libraries do as opposed to a traditional bookmobile is outreach van, so a good-sized van that they can load materials in, and that way staff can use that instead of using their own vehicles and using their own. So that would actually be something I'd be very interested in exploring. We've promoted an employee to the outreach position, so she's ready to go, get back to book deliveries, get back to other outreach events. So it's something along those lines that looks less like a great big traditional bookmobile, but more of a vehicle that we could use that would be decorated up as a library vehicle that could make the rounds for folks, would be great.
I'm imagining one of those things I see on Instagram where it has like the bookshelves in the van. Is that what I should be envisioning or not quite?
I would have to explore options. I
Okay.
think that's one direction to go in, or just just keeping it as sort of a van that you can load crates into easier than,
Okay.
one of my employees was doing all of this in a Prius, and that could get a little crowded trying to squeeze,
Yeah.
crates of books into it, so.
Mike and then Roger?
Along that same line, you see springing up all these little kind of kiosks along the road where, it's like, give a book,
Little
take,
free libraries.
take a look. I thought it was a good idea they had on the news. Someone in Plattsburgh is doing that with both VHS and DVD rental, not rentals, but it would be free. It's kind of like, and he's calling them Blockbuster, which is
That's
kind of like
funny,
old
yeah.
school. I think that's a great idea, because, everyone has all sorts of old stuff. And
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the little free libraries are privately
Right.
built and operated, but we do put our own materials in them, because that's the whole goal of them is sharing.
Right.
So we'll put books from our book sale or withdrawn books from the library in them, and whenever we do, we include information about the library so people know.
So
where
you
they're
don't
coming from.
personally own any of
We
those?
don't own
They're all
any of
private.
those. Nope,
Okay.
they're all privately owned.
I will say, if you do have some DVDs or VHSs you want to watch, they also rent those.
Oh, I know they do.
Yeah.
Along with the machine to watch them, because I don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
But some people just in their neighborhood, if they go buy these things, they may not come. And I know a lot of people, I've rented, DVDs here, and it's kind of a great service, but some people don't even realize what the
Renting
service.
a lot of VHS out of the red box these days?
No, I don't think so. Although I still have a lot of VHS tapes.
I know Roger had a
Let me
question.
sort through this.
A year ago, we were talking with the rec department about creating a sliding scale so that they could get the after-school kids in who had been getting off the bus and coming to the library, sometimes unsupervised, or some maybe with one parent or something. My understanding is that change in the scale didn't really affect the numbers, and now the whole program's been dropped. I'm just wondering, how is that impacting the budget or your programming?
Yeah, we made policy changes around that. We raised the age at which children could be unattended in the library from 8 to 4th grade, which feels pretty reasonable. That's still pretty young. So the younger kids who might be in the library now have to be registered to be there for a program so that we know they're coming. We know that they're expected to be there at a certain time. We can kind of keep track and reach out to the family if the child doesn't show up. So it's a little more work for us, but it's made us feel much more secure in having those younger kids in the library in a more structured way as opposed to the free-for-all that was happening before. I'll be really curious when the rec department starts up again to see what they end up choosing to do with after-school programming and how we can work together on that.
Mm-hmm. And does that impact your budget in any way?
No, it really doesn't. It probably dropped our count of people coming through the door a little bit, but honestly, not even significantly, because we still see more and more people coming in all the time.
And I'll just have one follow-up. Are there any, I think we're proud to have an exemplary library service here in Waterbury. And I'm just wondering, are there any particular parts of the community that you feel are underserved at this point?
That's something I'm always looking for and always trying to figure out where those people are and how to get to them. And that was part of our home delivery service that we started to provide, was to get to people who might be housebound. We advertised that through the Meals on Wheels program. We've only picked up a couple of people from that, but I'm happy to be able to reach those people. We're also doing a lot more outreach to the senior center in general, and so we're trying to get to senior adults who may not be able to get to this library. As much as possible, we try to make our programs as accessible to everyone as possible, so we never charge for programs, and we try to make them just as, no registration, no money fee has to be exchanged, they can just show up and enjoy a program as much as we can. So, but I'm always curious, and that was a big part of our strategic planning, was to try to reach out and figure out who are those people in town. For a while, we were going to the farmer's market with the Friends of the Library, and I found that to be a really interesting way to find some people who I didn't always see in the library. Unfortunately, then the farmer's market closed, so we've lost that outlet. But my outreach librarian and I are always looking for ways to get into the community. That's a big part of why we do events like River of Light, is Saturday night, we see people we never see during the week. So that was kind of a cool experience last night to have, a lot of people in the library, including some people we never see. A lot of out-of-town visitors too. A lot of families had out-of-town visitors.
Mike?
What percentage of usage, do you have any statistics on, like services that you have, like, for instance, you give out tickets to like Shelburne Museum, and I know you have like the telescope, and there are all kinds of things. Do you have any statistics on usage?
I was just looking at those last night, and I can tell you, you just named a couple of very popular items. We call those items Library of Things items. They're a little bit different from books, but we track their circulation in the same way. The top circulating Library of Things item is the Pass to the Echo Museum. That's huge, that's out all the time. The telescope, I think, is number 4, so it's also quite a big circulating item. We do use those numbers to make decisions about what we're gonna buy going forward,
So you buy those, it's not like Shelburne Museum gives like each library a certain number of passes?
It varies from place to place, but we do buy those, but they generally have maybe a bit of a discount for the library.
A discount for like nonprofit.
That's something that frequently the Friends of the Library cover for me, because they're a little bit outside of my book budget. The Department of Libraries provides state parks and state historical site passes, so that's really nice.
Thanks.
And I can tell you, I'm past that phase in life, but I used to borrow the Echo Pass from my local library, and I've heard from here parents how much they appreciate it. It's $20 to get an Echo.
Yeah.
And that's for an individual, so
Yeah.
it makes it really, it's a great place to go when you have young kids, but it's really expensive, so that free pass is huge.
Same thing, Shelburne Museum is pretty expensive, same similar price.
And the Montshire Museum passes are very popular. That one's huge too. Vins too.
Melissa,
Yep,
can I make a comment?
sure.
Or ask a question, actually? So I want to first say that I appreciate your efforts. It certainly seems like you're the right person for this position.
Thank you.
So, my basic understanding is, really, it's a level-funded budget other than a bit for staff increases, which is typical. My next question is, with Tom's discussion about the stock market having done so well, your concern about possibly moving some of them funds into a more stable position, what would be the possibility of the library trust wiping this additional cost for staff increase out this year with money from that trust? And I look at it in this manner, with what the state's proposing scares the hell out of a lot of people. My wife just told me yesterday that my Social Security benefits have been reduced, which we've been living high on the hog too long, so I understand that, and I'm not angry about it, if in fact what they do helps solve the problem. But if the stock market changes to any certain degree in the downward trajectory, you lose many multiples of that figure out of the trust. So I guess my thought is to use some of the increase that you've received so far to wipe this out for the benefit of the taxpayers. And I'm hoping that we have some capability of level funding our budget as the municipality itself for zero increase this year, because I think it's gonna be necessary based on what we're facing in other directions. So just something to consider, because if the stock market turns down, like I said, you're gonna lose that money anyway, and I'd rather see it be lost to the people of the town as opposed to just disappearing. And it sounds like you might have done really well with the stock so far, so, thank you.
So Chris, one interesting thing to note, and I'm pulling up the town's money here. So the library trust fund is strictly under the control of the library trustees. So they have full legal authority. I'm hoping they won't have an issue with this $30,000. They have full legal authority to say no to the town.
Correct.
They don't need to give a reason. Traditionally, they've generally been okay with this. So, you know, the challenge is if we do that, you know, you can buy down your tax rate. The challenge is the what now after that. So 2027, you've then got that much of a bigger problem if you use the trust fund to buy it down once.
I'm also pausing, Tom, and having a question actually about the trust fund, because I was gonna say, speaking on behalf of the select board, we did ask the trust to pay more in 1 year, which I don't see reflected on the spreadsheet. I'm not sure where the mistake is. When we had an increase in salaries to
Yeah,
help level it off. And
Yeah,
I know
you're
one
right.
of our conditions was for this year, we said we would go back to the normal amount. So at
We
one
did
point, there
last
had
year.
been an increase in pay, and that was something,
That was 24.
24, so 24 was 40,000 if I'm
24
wrong?
was 45K and then.
45.
back, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so, just to say, I appreciate the point around it, and between 23 and 24, when there was a bigger jump in the overall budget, we did make that ask to say, we would like an additional one-time contribution, and I hear that you're saying with the stock market and other, I will say, last year, we were pretty adamant with the trustees that that would not be the ask, that
Right.
we would return back to the baseline, so I'm just saying that on behalf of what I feel like the board has communicated with them, knowing they haven't reviewed that yet.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Well, I
you
was
can make
asking
the
her
note,
to
but.
convey that to them, that ask. And again, to my point, if the stock market turns down, you lose that money, it's disappeared forever. So if I were a gambling man, I'd say, I'm gonna take that gamble, pay down that number for this year. Things change year over year, so you don't know what next year will bring you. You may have an increase in donations, you may have other things that might level fund or bring so I'm just looking at this year's.
And Tom and I are meeting with the commissioners tomorrow night, so we'll be talking about the trust and other aspects of the budget tomorrow.
Great, thank you. Any other questions on this
Have
earlier?
they made the commitment for the 30,000 for this year?
This year, 2025 they have, 2026 it's a conversation, but I think it's a reasonable starting point.
Yeah.
I agree.
Right. Anything else on library for now?
What do you have for me?
Anything else, Rachel, you want to add?
Sure. Thank you for having me, and we'll have a lot more information. So,
Thank you for joining us on a Sunday.
yeah.
We very much appreciate it. I would say, I will note a time check. It's 11:05 by the clock on my thing. Do we want to do like a 3-minute break? Bio break?
I would love that.
Stretch? All right, we'll do. All right, page 1 on the, I should also say, Tom, this is the draft budget dated 12/7/25, and maybe we throw a watermark on future versions, noting that this will all get updated and adjusted as we move forward. But it's posted on the December 7th Select Board meeting. Thank you.
Just so people are aware, something happened with the meeting warning for this on the website and eFUD. I just deleted everything last night and reposted it. When I post agendas, I post them, I save them, I click on them, I make sure they open. Something happened in the meantime. If you see anything like that, just shoot me a text. If I'm near a computer, I can usually just make a change in 5 minutes. That being said, just looking at, so general government, looking at the revenues, so tax interest and penalties, I just try to look at the actuals. Tax interest is always a fun conversation. You know, the accountants, you know, Chris's wife is giving us some help. And the accountant's perspective, they want everyone to owe their to be fully paid up with their taxes. And from my perspective, if you're gonna pay 1.5% interest a month, great. I don't want back taxes to be 0. So we do a tax sale every year, but I don't see the need to do it every month. If people wanna pay that interest, I think it doesn't hurt to get it. The penalty assumes, the penalty on line 4, that assumes the 8% is approved by the voters, which is a question every year. So if that's lowered, then
You're proposing that it stay the same?
I'm proposing it stay the same. You know, we collect, geez, I forget the number offhand, but 18 million in school taxes, something like, no, 17 million in school taxes. If there's not a penalty and a substantial interest for not paying it on time, people aren't gonna pay it on time. Then we have a cash flow problem. Tax sale costs are legal fees associated with tax sales. So that's all additional revenue to the town that's paid by those individual taxpayers. And then line 6, that's a formula in state law. We get an automatic cut of state taxes, so it's really 0.00225. And so the number for next year just looks at the actual for this year and assumes 3% increase, and it feels like a safe assumption that school taxes will increase 3%.
I also just have to,
guess.
I just have to say, I think on behalf of like the select board, like ideally we want everyone to be able to pay their taxes in full and on time. And just note that like there's a variety of reasons that may or may not happen, and there's some inevitability. I think we make the case to voters that the 8% is a good incentive to do that. But I think these are realities of operating a town of our size, but I would certainly say like we're not trying to encourage more of it. Ideally, we want everyone to be able to pay in full and on time based on the budget we're proposing.
Yeah.
We're using history as our guide.
Yes.
Yeah. For the village admin service fee, that's, so you saw in Public Works budget, there was an expense for Bill Woodruff's time. This is revenue we get from EFUD, and it's for a chunk of my time, a chunk of Kaya Neely's time, a chunk of Net Rogers' time and the accounting side of the world, and I've raised those 3%. I've got to make some fine-tuning adjustments, but we're in the ballpark here.
Is it village or EFUD?
EFUD, it's just, I've never changed the name, but it's EFUD.
Is that based on actuals or based on a percentage?
It's based on, it's historically based on a percentage adjusted for actuals.
Thank you.
And traffic control income is revenue we get, and it's based on tickets issued, but we don't see it until it comes in, and it's all very, very squirrely in a way. So I think 1,500 is pretty reasonable. It varies up and down a bit here and there.
So we get a percent of the tickets?
Very small percent.
I know that's not a lot.
So,
What would
you know,
happen if we hired a sheriff's deputy?
I would hope that in 2027 we could raise this a little bit, but it takes time.
Would the town get those?
Yeah, but it's a small percentage, and it's after everything is adjudicated and paid, and so I don't think even if you assume that we're getting the sheriff in 2026, I'm not sure this is gonna amount to much.
So it all goes through the courts and we get money back that way?
Yeah. And the pilot is the number I talked about at the beginning, and that's a big reduction in that revenue, and I'm hoping that the number can at least not go further, but I've got to spend the coming weeks ground truthing that and trying to get a sense of really what it is, but then also trying to work with Tom and Teresa and VLCT folks in other towns about addressing the legislature.
Can I ask some clarifyings on that? So earlier, when we sort of briefed on this line item, you alluded to the fact that, I'm gonna butcher your wording, but it's like they're withholding municipal funds.
They set an amount that they'll pay every year out of the pilot fund. And the pilot fund is funded by local option taxes, by the portion that we don't get. And then it's adjusted by your CLA, and the question that I'm trying to get an answer to is, okay, everyone's CLA is moving in the same direction. So everyone is reporting their pilot payment is way down. So who's gaining from this? Is it just the fund is not gonna make out the expected payout that was approved? Is there someone who did a reappraisal and their pilot revenues went from 200 grand to 600 grand? I'm trying to get the net picture here, but the best your CLA can be is 100%. So if everyone's CLA is changing by, 10% a year, because properties are going up, there's a numerator and denominator here, and I'm not understanding one side of the coin there.
Yeah, where's the other money going?
It's gotta be going somewhere, and so I need to figure that out, but the Stowe manager is up in arms about it, and I'm hearing all the Chittenden County towns are up in arms about it. I'm sure the city of Montpelier is going through the same.
Can we make it, regardless of CLA, let's just take that totally out of the picture, because I don't think we could, make a case. But Waterbury is going to be impacted substantially, because with this whole return to work, and they're renting that additional space at Pilgrim Park, there's gonna be more impacts to the municipality, and can't we make that case that we deserve more?
Well, Pilgrim Park is still privately owned.
Right, but
So-
but it has more people running our roads, more people, just services that are being impacted.
I think there's a legislative argument to be made here. When it comes to Pilgrim Park, you don't typically change the value of private property, the assessed value of private property, if it's vacant versus not vacant. It's based on improvements.
Yeah.
That being said, if it was, industrial, more of an industrial space or commercial space that has been converted to office space, and there are improvements going into it, that could be something that would impact the grand list.
But it's still being assessed in tax as a
Right,
project.
still wouldn't be a pilot.
Okay.
And- Yeah.
I guess I would just also note that Waterbury, the buildings have been there. We worked really hard after Irene to get them there. It's a huge state
Oh, I know.
investment. And during COVID, we had no folks in the buildings. And in many ways, having state office employees in towns can be an asset to
Oh, I think
local
I think
businesses.
it's
So
great.
I'm not denying that there's expenses. I think I would hesitate to an argument along those lines because I think we might not want the other side of it. I think they're an asset for the community. I will say, Tom, I'm really I think the fact that you're framing, this is a huge, as compared to our budgeted number, it's a $80,000 shortage in the budget that is not because of overspending in an area or different municipal services. So it's a big swing, and I appreciate Tom flagging it. Do you recall offhand, Tom, the 23 to 24 to 25? I guess that was 25 budget, so not looking at that, but why it suddenly went up in 23 as
That's-
compared? Because I know they weren't fully funding the payments. I will also say, I think, was it last year, one of the first years, the legislature at times, I know, hasn't had enough money to pay out, so they paid out a percentage.
I've got to dig up all that history. My understanding of it has changed at the time. My initial understanding was that it should rise each year because local option taxes are rising, more towns are implementing them. But there's a hard cap on what the legislature will pay. At least there was this year, and so we're trying to, And VLCT made an argument last year that the pilot fund is adequately funded going forward, and it doesn't need this $12 million surplus. And tried to get that surplus distributed back to towns that had generated it through local option taxes. The legislature disagreed with that, and they did agree that local option taxes going 75% to the town versus 70% would not put future pilot payments at risk. They didn't agree to give that surplus, and I think part of it is, just my read of watching some of the meetings, is that some members of the legislature want to see every town get a pilot payment, whether they have state property or not. They want to give some form of base aid to towns. And my argument is that surplus wasn't generated by every town. It was generated just by towns with local option taxes. And I don't feel like it's equitable for Waterbury residents, for people to pay Waterbury taxes in Waterbury for that to go to wherever else.
Agreed.
I think it's a hard argument because most of the local option taxes are generated in 15 or 20 towns in Vermont, and there's a whole lot of small towns that, you know, if Duxbury had a local option tax, how many businesses would collect it? So I think there's some element legislatively of not wanting to poke that bear too hard, because you might lose it.
I guess my question just would be, $80,000 went somewhere.
Right, and that's what I've got to,
Though I guess, was that based on a state estimate? I guess looking at these numbers, I will say 383 to 340 is much less of a drop, so I'm questioning where our 420 budget number came from.
based on the estimate that the fund was growing, and then all the additional towns paying in LOT into it, it was gonna come back,
Proportionally.
yeah.
Tom, you explained earlier that the pilot program is supposed to pay towns for state land in lieu of taxes, and then for current use. But is the legislature finding a new way of funneling that money to other uses?
No, I don't believe so, and current use is separate, but I think it's just, I think the formula needs to be looked at. Whether that's legislative or whether that's from the staffing perspective and a matter of interpreting. But I think from any town's perspective, adjusting your pilot payment by the CLA doesn't make fundamental sense. I think any town would prefer a number that doesn't change. Just having some budget stability. Because from our perspective, when we reappraise, that year, if the formula doesn't change, our pilot is, I don't know, 550, 600. I would tell you, we might want to think about not budgeting all that revenue and creating a reserve fund, because it's going to go down for a long time
Everybody else
slowly.
will be reappraising.
And then we try to figure out a way to get this level over the long term.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's frustrating when Waterbury institutes a local option tax, that pilot, just that alone adds to the pilot program, and then the revenue goes down.
Yeah.
Quick comment?
Yep.
5% increase that the state's allowed us through the pilot, what number would that be in reflection to this loss through the pilot?
Doesn't go to here, that 5%.
No, I know, I'm just saying, what do we potentially increase additionally over the 70%? What would that 5% estimated figure be? Maybe that was the state's way of saying, we're gonna give you more local options tax in lieu of a reduction in
Maybe,
pilot.
5% of our local option tax is 40, 50 grand.
So half of what we're losing.
Yeah,
Though it's 80 from budget, I should say,
Yeah.
not 80
So
from
it'd be
last year.
half, or a little more than half of what we're losing. So, and to Mike's point, with all the people coming back, what will be the additional increase in local options tax with that personnel? Just something to think about too, going towards this. I know there's gonna be increased services perhaps, but I'd be curious to see what that represents. moving forward, you know?
Yeah. And then going down further, the revenue from forest and parks is legislatively approved each year, but that's, number hasn't changed in a long time. So again, the state can cut that, but it hasn't changed in a long time, and that's about, it's essentially a per acre fee for state property that is protected in perpetuity. If there's additional land added to the state forest preserve, presumably the Gilpin land, that may change by a few dollars, but there's many thousands of acres here, so that number wouldn't move much by a small addition. And then current use is reimbursement for the town for essentially lost taxes for property in current use. And that number tends to be pretty stable. We generally just budget based on actuals. Occasionally we get a little bit of a change, and that's if current use is, from the property owner's perspective, it's a 10-year program. If you withdraw during that 10-year period, there's a penalty, and some of that comes to us.
What percent of our land base is in current use? Do you know that?
I don't know the acreage offhand. What I can tell you, and I could spend hours on a soapbox here, is that there's an awful lot of land in the state of Vermont in current use that is not used for active agriculture or forestry, and I think that's a major problem for all of us who pay taxes, especially education taxes. Let's just leave it at that. And the railroad tax is something that is not determined by us, it's not tied to our tax rate, but it comes in every year, and I believe it's set by the state. But it's fairly steady. The last year was around that 2,600.
What is that? Just because we have a railroad going here?
That's all it is, yeah.
Okay.
Why'd it go down?
We just haven't seen it yet this year. But
No, I mean, it dropped from 2679 to 26.
that's just the budget.
Okay.
And there's other grants that we've gotten in the past, but we don't budget the expense or the revenue since they're not known and they're passed through. So you see in a prior year, we had 2025, we had a grant for the reservoir. That's the greeter grant. Generally pays for people at the boat ramp to make sure you're not spreading invasives. So that revenue comes in, we pay it back out. The brick grant was an older grant, so we don't budget grants unless we feel like we have real certainty there. At least I wouldn't. User fees, leases, that's this rung, down to line 27. And then going down further, town clerk fees, line 30. Try to look at the actuals. They were, if you went back in even pre-2022, they were quite a bit higher. And they're lower because there's just fewer real estate transactions right now. So I think the budget for 2026 I propose is fairly reasonable. We could get later in the year and look at 2025 actuals. But the fees are set by law. So we don't really have any ability, aside from one or two minor fees, to change them. They're really set by law, so it's about volume.
And these are just fees charged to individuals for?
Recording. Mostly it's recording. Historical Society, that $15,000, that's tied further down in this budget to staffing, so they reimburse us for their historian.
We're just going back to town clerk fees.
Yep,
Vault fees, where is that in there?
that's all in there, that's
Okay.
everything. Line 33 from the reappraisal fund, I've highlighted that because that could be a topic of future conversation. We have a couple $100,000 in the reappraisal fund. We made our lister full-time last year, who's leading the reappraisal, and so their conversation last year was about paying for a portion of his salary and benefits, a difference between him going part-time and full-time as we increase that. But certainly a number to look at. We're in the midst of the appraisal. We have a fund for it. That $30,000 is a number we could revisit at a later date. For now, I just plugged in something consistent with last year, but I need a little time from the staff perspective to think about some of the upcoming costs with that, not just for the lister, but there's also some potential of the need to hire part-time employees. And so that's gonna be a topic of future conversation. I'm not set on what my own recommendation to you yet. Going down further to what's called the debt service cluster, though I'd like to rename that because it's really not that. Interest and sweep on CDs is really interest earnings. That's all it is. And so much of that is really bulked at the beginning and ends of the year when we have our tax payments and we're pretty flush. So once the check clears to the school for December, we'll have a few $1 million in cash, but before that we had 10. So you have a few months where you get really good interest. I'd like to work with Karen in the future to see at times if we can perhaps buy some short-term CDs. Overall, the way the town works here is our liquidity is pretty strong, except for those few months before the school tax payment is due. So there are times in the past when we'll borrow from ourselves, from our tax stabilization fund on a short-term basis to get through. But we, at least since I've been here, we haven't ever delayed payments to vendors. It's all pretty quick. And then the tax stabilization fund, the $50,000 is, for a number of years now, we've taken essentially 5% of that fund. The voters approved that some years ago. So if there was any desire to use the tax stabilization fund for any other purpose, I need to work with council and think carefully about how that question is warned, because the voters basically put those funds in a lockbox 8 or 10 years ago. So above and beyond the 5%, we've just got to have a very carefully worded question. That being said, I think of the tax stabilization fund differently over time. And we have a pretty substantial slug of revenue coming in from the local option tax, which really serves as a tax stabilization fund. I mean, last year the voters approved 2 big capital purchases that would have otherwise been paid by property taxes. It's great to have it. It's great to have it because it gives us ability to meet our liquidity challenges that happen in the summer. If there was no local option tax and there was a big capital project before you, I would probably be arguing to leave the tax stabilization fund alone. But with the local option tax, if there was a big project before you in the future years and there was a conversation to consider tapping into it to pay for some of that, I think it'd be a reasonable conversation to have. I think the local option tax just financially changed the game entirely. But I don't have any proposal in front of you this year to spend anything more than roughly the 5%.
Is that lockbox that was voted on previously set the tax stabilization at 50,000?
No, it gave us the authority to take 5% of the fund in any given year towards reducing taxes. And that's been, as I understand, generally the tradition since then. And I think when it was established, it was a great tool. And I know Bill leaned on it heavily for things that we're using the LOT now. So there were some years when the tax stabilization fund was used to buy capital equipment.
Yeah.
And we were still, from a budget perspective, we were still paying debt, but we were paying it to ourselves. So we were raising property taxes, but in essence, we were depositing it into a savings account for the voters. So it was a great tool for a while. I just think we now are liquid to use it differently.
discussion?
Yep.
My concern is this, that we're headed down a path of committing most of our local option tax money. Coming through Stowe yesterday, I was talking to a friend of mine about their local options tax, and my sister-in-law works there, and she tells me what revenue they bring in.
I can't imagine what it
Oh,
is.
it's unbelievable. But to that point, you look over and all you see is that ski area. That's the driver behind all of that. Stowe is 70% non-resident now, hell of a lot of businesses. They got a gift, I guess, given to them if that's the way you want to look at it, but yet not, residents can't live there. We don't have that asset, nor do we probably really want it. My worry is, moving forward, if we overcommit our local options tax, the buying power of our dollar now is about half of what it was 20 years ago. The total value that we have in CDs and tax stabilization, could you?
Tax stabilization's $1,050,000, 1.1 million, right in that range.
1.1 in capital, in CDs? Or
CDs, bonds, different investments.
that's all included? Okay. So really, we only got about $500,000 in buying power that we otherwise had 20 years ago. I had spoke to a couple of the select board members about possibly considering, before it's too late, before we overcommit our local options tax, so most of that revenue is gobbled up in debt or, some additional projects we take on for a number of years. Does it make sense to commit some of that to that tax stabilization fund to maybe be my desire to double it for what I see as potentially future protection for the town? Seeing how we've lost half of our buying value in the last 20 years. So something to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Before we overcommit the local options tax, and then you have no ability to do that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The line 40, that transfer in of the local option tax, that doesn't impact the tax rate. That's for a different project later on that I'll get to, so doesn't impact the tax rate at all. And then line 43 miscellaneous is we always get something not quite planned for. Sometimes it's a legislative gift. I've been notified several times about little surprises from the federal government that have come in, and so I feel like it's safe to budget a little bit of money in miscellaneous revenue, because it always is a reality.
What do we get? What is that, 19,000?
We got I'll give you an example. I got a call this year about a state grant that was closed out in 2022, so before my time, but the revenue was not drawn down in full. So send me, here's the form, sign it, here's your $8,000. Don't care what it's for at that point, I'm happy to sign the form and get $8,000, right? There's always miscellaneous revenue that comes in. Oftentimes it's that we can draw down for portions of staff time through grants if the funds are available. So I feel comfortable always budgeting a little something there. Not comfortable budgeting $50,000, but a little something. What's not in here, and again, we don't have any formal announcement, but what's not in here is any funding through the CDBG grants that could be used to reimburse staff time. We did have pretty substantial funding in there for grant administration, and a portion of that could potentially be staff time, but again, we don't have the grants formally, we don't have contracts. Not enough information to plausibly add revenue to the budget.
I will also say, I guess maybe I'm curious, in light of this pilot conversation, about the prudence of, obviously, we're hiring someone and we intend it to be paid for by a grant, but I'm curious, given federal uncertainty, the prudence of relying heavily on that to balance a budget as opposed to having it available for staff. I mean, I don't want to not reflect it if we think it's realistic. I'm curious. I mean,
I think we need a little more time to
Yeah.
delve into that.
What's the likelihood of having more certainty on that by the end of the year?
I think pretty good.
Really?
What's our deadline for the warning? January,
January 30th, something like that?
something like that. I think by then we've got, a little bit of certainty. Certainly more certainty on the pilot side of things too.
Right.
Tom, on FEMA, which is on this front page, do we have, could you just remind us of which ones are fully and if there's any outstanding reimbursement we anticipate?
All the revenue is in or accounted for. There's a little portion of my time that we'll still get a check for, but that's 2025 money. All the work for the 2024 storm is completely done. I've signed all the closeout paperwork for that FEMA project. Every time you sign something that's final, it turns out there's another little tiny piece you've got to do. But we're very nearly done on both of them. 2023, there still might be a little bit of work. They just got to seed the soccer field. They did it this year and it didn't quite take. It was a little too late in the year.
But per your point, you're not reflecting anything because nothing would be meaningful
Right.
and it would
Right.
be
We
to
budgeted
later
for it
years.
once, so I don't want to, even though the revenue will come in a little later, I don't want to budget twice.
Thank you.
Page 2?
On page 2, on the regular pay side, trying to be mindful of the tax rate, but the regular pay number includes a 15-hour-a-week person that would start April 1st, so roughly a month after town meeting day, and that's to help give us some coverage during the vacancy. And I can talk a little more about that, but there's, I think, an executive session part of that. The natural disaster coordinator is the individual we've hired. And the ethics officer is really an estimate. My intent with that individual is to try to be a resource to help limit their time. But I don't know if that's way too little. You never know quite what'll come in.
We've doubled the amount that we're gonna do for the natural disaster coordinator.
I've had one applicant who would do it for that amount as an annual stipend.
Okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and come to the defense of that, as we need one of those, I think, on a constant basis. And that's our one applicant wanted to get paid.
Going down further, the health insurance is based on the head count of who we have. The deductibles is an estimate. I want to look at that more closely once we have final December numbers, but budgeted 95 this year and are at 65. And so I think we're gonna have quite a surplus this year at year end, and maybe that 2026 can come down a bit, but I want to be pretty careful about that. As we go down, things get fairly formulaic. Line 71, I want to just know, we'll talk about that in planning and development, but there's, excuse me, there's software fees that's related to our mapping software. When you go into the planning development website and click on the online maps, it's related to updating those maps. Line 75, I want to talk about a bit. We talked about that through the LOT, and I had called that something different. So for now, there's still funding there. Initially, I talked about that as some money to help advance Randall Meadow and FEMA projects. I still think there's likely a FEMA element, but I think of that as Stanley Wasson, that the town might need some specific consulting help on the Stanley Wasson side as we advance an agreement, if we advance an agreement. And so those funds, I think, would be useful for the select board to have. You might need an expert on a certain issue.
But you're not budgeting for Randall Meadow?
I think with the possibility of a substantial grant coming, that I'm not necessarily planning on it. I think this $25,000 could be renamed more broadly. I'm not yet convinced we need Randall Meadow funds if there's a grant.
Okay. I will just note, I feel like we've gotten a lot of questions around what is being spent unbudgeted on various projects. So
Yep.
even if it's a nominal amount, it may be worth putting it in separate lines to give the public that clarity if that's the
Good.
intent.
Good call, I can do that. On the legal services side,
And honestly, Woody, for that, I mean, just to
Yeah.
say, like, I would anticipate if we're awarded grants, we have any of them, and again, hopefully we'll have more clarity prior to town meeting, but I think if there's,
yep,
I don't know if that becomes a cluster, I liked the debt cluster, even if it was the wrong name, but the grant-funded resilience, grant-funded, I think we've had questions about whether it's, and that, to be clear, I don't want to mess with the accounting system, I know there might be
no, that's a good
very
point.
good reasons, but I think sometimes folks are asking, like, what are you spending on resilience? And well, we have part of it, and then, in some places that's really clear, in other places I wonder about how we can be more clear about the package of things, whether grant funded or otherwise.
Point well taken. And so it sounds like a different cluster naming convention for this, and then also for trees.
That's my offhand comment just on this
Okay.
one, but if others have thoughts.
On legal, we're a little over budget this year, but I think we're nearing the end. And so I think next year we can be more consistent with other actuals, but I am proposing to add a new line. And that's that we've had a number of inquiries that are really about freedom of information, some of the ethics complaints, and I think we need a separate line item to track those things. And it would seem, sometimes a freedom of information request is simple, I want this document, and I just give it to you, but sometimes it takes more time and warrants some legal help, and again, I try to control those costs, but there are times in my life too where I've got to crank on something, I just need to say, attorney,
Yeah.
take care of this.
Just want to point out you put FOIL.
Freedom of Information Law?
Yeah.
Should I call it something
I mean,
else?
Freedom of Information Act.
Okay,
It's
Right.
FOIA, okay.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought it was a typo, but.
It's okay.
And Tom, is that legal for all departments or exclusive of planning and zoning in this line?
Planning and zoning has a separate budget.
That's what I thought, okay, thank you.
But yeah, if there's a library issue, for instance, that would come through here. Going down a little further, so the line 79, voting machine elections, met with Karen about that. Could maybe come down a little bit, and some of her expenses this year were grant funded. Want to have a healthy number in part because some of, I think, the legal, some of the expenses related to an election come down to a sense of security. And so I think the current thinking now is, a federal election in 2026, it would be nice for the folks working that election to have the presence of a sheriff. I think that's reasonable. You know, I think Karen's current thinking right now is probably not necessary for the primary. Primary's, you know, just not as heightened, but that might change. So I feel like I'd rather make sure there's some resources there if needed.
Is that not gonna be a deterrent for somebody trying to vote, seeing armed police at their polling place?
I have not had that complaint in the past. I also cannot tell you the history of having armed police there.
I believe it was related to the school use concern, so I will say, I think the other distinction was the primary is usually occurring when school is not in session, and I believe, as we know, there's been extended conversations about using the school. So I believe the desire was due to school being in session while the gym/cafeteria was used as a polling place. We did do this in 2022, I believe, and I believe that officer was stationed in that kind of overpass area, not immediately outside the polls.
It's sort of in like the foyer.
Correct, so that kind of over the stairs, not
Right.
down in the gym where actual voting was happening was. So I mean, Karen, I will say, said this was requested on behalf of like the JPs and her in terms of their comfort. So if the
Okay.
request is coming from them.
As opposed to your comment, Kane, I don't think it's a deterrent. As a matter of fact, I think to a lot of people, it's a positive that they feel that if there is some issues, that they're safe. You know, I don't think because there's a, you know, it's not like there's a, you know, Mike Bard coming in with his 9mm and stuff like that, but, you know, a deputy coming in and protecting the voting area, I think is good.
I think what Kane was getting at was many people have different experiences in their lives with law enforcement. But I think regardless, the request is coming from the justices of the peace and the clerk, so I think we can look at it a little differently.
It protects them.
Tom, is that line also include, I believe, interpretation services was another, I don't know, thing that Karen mentioned if someone needed for a town meeting?
I think it could safely include it, because there were several $1,000s this year that was for equipment. So I
Okay,
think we could safely pay for interpreter services if needed out of that line.
okay, I was just noting that was another thing that she brought up.
And again, we can, line 86, the NBOF, we'll review that separately, but that's just based on the square footage. Line 92, the commercial audit, there's a couple more years on that contract, and then we'll put it out to bid and see what we get.
We should also check, because, I mean, I recall it being 5 years and Bill Sheplock still being manager, so at this
think his-
point, it's probably not that much longer.
We're getting there. Line 93 for the county taxes, I don't have that number yet, but I took the 2025 actual and inflated that by 3%. And hopefully that's reasonable. Line 94, insurance, property, and liability. Every department has got insurance costs spread throughout it. Very soon I get the annual number from League of Cities and Towns, and then I'll rejigger those a bit. But I just put small increases in. They generally don't change a whole lot, but that's not a final number by any means. Line 97, Memorial Day, July 4th, that is fireworks, is almost all of it, I think. There's a couple other miscellaneous expenses there. I forget if we have the sheriffs on July 4th or not. And I actually buy the fireworks this time of year. So take a risk that the voters won't cut that. Because if you don't buy them, if you buy them now, you get a 10% discount. If you don't, you don't. So I think traditionally we buy them in December and hope it's all funded.
I think at some point, doesn't have to be this year, we should start considering environmental and noise impact
as some communities have moved to like renting drone shows as opposed to fireworks. I'd like to see a debate over that. I'm not taking a side necessarily, but I've definitely heard every, not quite Independence Day, I hear from lots and lots of people about their PTSD or dogs or
Dogs don't like them.
So
dogs certainly don't like them.
I agree completely. I had this same discussion with Rotary when it came time for NQID planning. When I looked like 2 years ago, and the prices hopefully have gone down because drones have become more common, a drone show is about 30 grand a pop. So
All right, yeah.
it's,
I think a
I love
debate
the
is
idea.
worth having over the continuation of the use of fireworks as it impacts people, the environment, and pets,
yeah.
or animals of all species. And every NQID, I hear it from at least 24 people.
Do you know, Tori, I haven't done any research on this, do you know if there are sufficient operators of the drones to put on the shows?
Like I said, last time I looked into it, it was like 2 years ago. There were really only like 2 companies that would service Vermont. So it wasn't even like you could really
Okay.
put them in a bidding war, you know?
Mhm.
Like I said, like they've become more common, could be less, could be more options. I agree with Kane, it's worth having the debate. I do hear a lot of complaints about it, but sadly, cost-wise, I can't.
Well, it's just a question maybe you put on a town meeting day ballot, like a discussion of, like, how does everybody feel? Do we continue the Boom Boom show, or are we going another direction?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But if you're buying them now.
Right.
We do also have the 250th anniversary of independence. So maybe that's a good reason to keep it for a year.
And it's not in here yet, but I've been told that there might be a small funding request towards that effort, along the lines of a couple grand.
For the 250th committee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the last part.
It might be a few $1,000s requested in funding towards the 250th,
All right.
but I just don't know if yet. For line 99, the tax abatement, I looked at what we gave in abatements this year and took away 2 of the properties that we now own and tried to get a reasonable number, but you never quite know how the BOA is gonna go and what's gonna happen there.
Do you recall offhand, as I recall, those were almost all flood damaged and or buyout? Does that seem reasonable? Maybe one other special case.
One of the challenges there, I think, is that a couple of these places are not, the FEMA buyout process is stalled, and they're continuing to ask for abatement of taxes, and they're modified so that the Board of Civil Authority is feeling like, yeah, we have a precedent we've set, and that we can't really go against that precedent, and until the ownership is settled, we're going to continue to be sort of boxed into offering an abatement.
Yeah. Line 101, senior citizens, we do have their request, it hasn't changed. So I know this, partly it's on here and partly senior citizens are on the warning. And then the line 104, the RW number is based on the presentation given about a month ago, I believe. So honoring that request from RW, we're proposing to.
And Tom, am I correct that we combined 2 prior lines on that between 23 and 24?
Correct, yeah. Used to be partly in planning and development's budget, and I just consolidated it all in one place. So yeah, there was no giant increase in any one year.
Thank you.
And all that ARPA stuff at the bottom is history. Good history, but history.
Finally.
And then look at our agenda, switch it noon to something else.
No, I didn't have, all I have on the agenda is I have to review next meeting agenda at 12:50. The only other bullets we had on this, I'm looking at the top, I just did it all in one because I had no idea how to even guess at timing. re-review of local option tax spending, which we can do if we want, and considerations for the warning. But, I mean, truly the board's pleasure. Again, we're scheduled to 1, so I'm flexible with how we want to use the time.
So one thought I had is, I have Parks and Recs in here, and I think I have a pretty reasonable starting point, but I would love a couple weeks or a week in a day to fine tune that, and maybe do that at a next meeting. But I think whatever changes
I don't take any problem with that.
proposed are not, we're not gonna move the net bottom line by a lot. Happy to talk about solid waste, and I did work with the fire chief and his budget, but I'd rather have him be here. So I was hoping we could perhaps go through solid waste, which is easy enough, and then towards the back, planning and zoning, and maybe municipal building, and then talk about the warning.
Sounds great.
So the solid waste is the next page after general government. And I do have a note from I'm struggling the name of the solid waste story. It's not Mad River, it's,
Never Alliance?
Yeah, Ed River
Maybe.
Solid Waste Alliance.
yeah, but John
John
Walters,
Walter.
the chief of that,
Mr.
not the
Recycle.
chair, but the staffer. So that's not that number's not changing.
Wait, it's not Central Vermont Solid Waste District?
No,
No,
that's a
we're
different district.
Mad River Management Resource Alliance, I think.
The map is really wild. If you look at,
Yeah.
at some point, there was a
It's
town to
how-
opt in or out. I
Yeah,
don't know
But
why.
it's also like
but-
how roads go, it's not like based on town borders.
And then,
Bizarre.
and then line fly below that in Green Up Day, it's not a huge amount, but I wanted to bump that. And that's because what really happens is, before Green Up Day, there's always some couches, things like that get dumped. And that has come out of Public Works. I'm like, let's just put it here and just reflect what we're really paying for that.
Sorry, and just clarifying, the quote, landfill line is the solid waste district?
Yes.
Thank you.
And my understanding of the law is if that board votes to increase their charges, they have statutory authority to do that. It does not require Waterbury's approval, whether that be the Selectboard or the voters. The board has the authority to raise a per capita fee. It's in their charter.
And I think it's wonderful that, like, with us being in the Mad River District versus the Central Vermont District, like, when they have hazardous waste collection, they charge everyone who comes and, drops off stuff for stuff
Yeah.
where ours is free.
Do you by any chance know what this line 14 animal control is?
Yes. So
Animal control.
that is really just a hedge. Are we gonna have any animal control fees? And I've worked pretty hard to make sure we don't, but it's a hedge if we need to call a pound and house a dog.
Okay.
But that's really what it is.
Okay.
The public health, that's a payment, not a member item, there's a different legal obligation, but that's payment to Central Vermont Mental Health Services. So the other few grand there, the $1,200 is to the health officer, $100 a month. The other few grand is really just a hedge as to whether or not we'll ever have to use a vet, and we haven't had to for a long time.
But that's different than the pound service. 16.
Yeah, the pound service is just if needed.
Okay.
So it hasn't been needed in a long time, so I feel like we should budget something just in case
But,
we need to
yeah,
utilize a pound.
okay.
We did not take the option with the Hyde Park.
No, they offered an agreement to the town, off the top of my head, $7 or $8 grand a year.
Right.
They have a pound they built, and they were searching for other municipal partners to offset their cost. And they would not, and what I said was, we haven't used a pound in years, so all I want is the rare, that I said I was willing to pay some contractual amount in the rare event I needed space. And they said the lowest they would go was a guarantee of 2 spaces in their pound, and I said, it's been a decade since we needed 1. Paying for 2 is
Yeah.
is asking a bit much. So at that point, now we can still use it, there's a fee if we use it, and they still said we can still use it as available, and it's always been available. And they have an animal control officer who's, you know, paid and generally reachable, so if there's an issue, we need to take the dog there in the middle of the night, we could do that.
I also have to say, the 2023 numbers are
Meaning
looking.
the animal control officer.
2023 is, I gotta correct that, it's probably budget.
That's what I was just gonna say. That was my guess. I was like, I think you maybe just copied the wrong
Yeah.
column, because they look very round. And I don't recall paying someone
So
15K.
that's the downside of having a December 7th Sunday meeting.
Totally, no, totally understood, not a problem.
And then skipping parks. And going past highway and fire. Now we come upon planning and zoning. Planning and, you give folks a second, make sure you're there. That one I did put a header on. Starting with the fees, you know, the year's not over. I know we had a couple of recent permits where there was a, you know, a small four-figure fee that'll pop in this year, but I think we've got to cut from the budget. The town increased fees at the beginning of 2024, late in 2023, as I recall. They hadn't moved in a long, long time. And we thought we were gonna have a little more revenue, but permits were pretty well down this year overall. So I think it's prudent to have some reduction there to reflect the actuals a little better. I did add to here a new item which wasn't talked about at the last meeting, and that's after having some conversation with Neil, and he's talked to the planning commission. They have $50,000 this year that was used to hire the SE group to assist on the town plan, and they are on budget. That being said, there's a bit of a distance to go, and so the request is to have a $10,000 hedge if needed. That they might get towards the end of that contract, and they might have some additional tasks that they'd like done by the consultant. That being said, I've been in this business a long time. I suspect that if you budget for a hedge if needed, it becomes an actual expense. That's just, if you have additional funds for a consultant, you're gonna advance your project a little differently and faster. I still think it's reasonable. In the end, I think $60,000 for a town plan update is reasonable, especially considering the last update was really not a complete update. So I'm not necessarily opposed to it, and I would try to work with them to make sure it's not a given that they spend it, but I think it's a reasonable request to think about.
Is there any opportunity to apply for more grant funding to support it?
So there's municipal planning grants, and the Conservation Commission applied this year. Haven't heard word of that award or not. I expect I will by the end of the year. Municipal planning grants are traditionally used for things like town plan and bylaws update. I think the general thinking of the planning commission and Neil is to complete the town plan, and then we'd be a good candidate to start on phase 2 of the bylaws with municipal planning grant help.
And they did apply previously and it wasn't funded, right? That was in our, for
Yeah.
this year. So
Which
they
was a
did try,
surprise.
which was
But
unfortunate.
we sort of gave the opportunity for the Conservation Commission to apply this year, right?
Yeah.
I also think for this, they said the timeline was gonna be hard. I don't think they're notified till later, and by the time you contract, and then because
Yeah,
it's a
spend
grant,
money
you have to be
before-
competitive, is what I had heard with regards to this. And I think we just have to check, I know LOT, or I know this is a one-time project, but our consistency around LOT. We did it last time, so it's internally consistent, but now that we have the policy formally adopted.
Moving down past the fringe, which is formulaic and down this year a bit. Going down to line 18, which is professional services, that's a little bit, in 2024, some of that money was consultant money that was grant funded, but in general, that's a little bit of consulting help that might be needed for other projects aside from the town plan. I think it's prudent to have something there for staff. Things like, small mapping projects, things like small help that might be needed to advance a grant application. So I'm proposing something there. I think it's reasonably consistent with actuals aside from 24 when we had a different project in front of us. Line 22, that is the town's respective fee to be a member of the Green Mountain Byway Committee. And having a senior moment here. Who's on that committee for the town? Laura Perrette does that work for the town.
What is that?
That's Alyssa can, I'm afraid to butcher it. If you drive around, you may notice the Green Mountain Byway signs. That's some of the marketing that goes with the byway and the routes.
Got it.
It was a state and or federal, speaking from 2022 recollection, so grain of salt. When I worked at RW, we worked on it. There was a federal highway program at some point where you essentially said Vermont has like 10 in the state. You can get a whole fancy map of like, this is the Green Mountain Byway, this is Shires of Vermont. There's the Route 100 Byway, which is not Route 100 here, it's Route 100 in the southern part of the state. But they're all scenic and you can, there used to be money for like signage and different things. Ours now currently is Waterbury Stowe and then into like Hyde Park and a loop. That would be via Smugs when it's open, which is its own special byway.
And Laura Perrette Laura served in that role for a long time. I don't know who appointed her or the history, but I think she's a really good person for it. I know she was on RW's beautification committee for a long time and part of the Waterbury Arts Group.
Yeah, still in the Waterbury Arts Group.
Okay.
Line 24, the town plan update is the $10,000 that I talked about earlier. Line 25, that is legal services separate to planning and zoning, of which there's fairly routine legal consults related there. And I know consistently, I have heard from the chair of the DRB they'd like there to be a bit more zoning enforcement. And so,
Absolutely.
and I've had this conversation with a new zoning administrator that zoning administrators have pretty significant legal authority, that the ZA by law can initiate a legal action that brings the town into environmental court. By law, I don't really have any authority to step on that if I wanted to. And then once it's in court, it is the purview of the select board.
Has postage really gone up that much?
So, no.
Okay.
I'm budgeting an increase in postage, and I think it's warranted because I'm thinking, I neglected to say something in general government. In general government, when I talked about the LOT a few weeks ago, I talked about software initiatives and payroll. And it's a huge priority of mine, it remains a huge priority of mine, but after some conversation with Alyssa and staff, before we do that, I want to focus more on the rental registry. The zoning software works good, but the rental registry we're still working out that kink. So my thought was, let's give ourselves some postage money in the event that we want to beat the bushes a little bit here again and try to increase enrollment, that we've got a little bit of a budget to do it.
And I'll just say for transparency to the board, because Tom brought this to us for LOT and happy to talk more. I'm not making a decision unilaterally. I just said I had concerns with software we already had and that it's taken a little while to get it up and running quite to the spec we want. To be clear, I'm putting that on the vendor, not on staff. But in terms of working out those kinks, if we felt ready to launch 2 other additional big things at the same time. So just want to recognize, like, that can be a board discussion. That doesn't have to be a me thing. But I said, we've done new software. I know we had some concerns from the public about ongoing recurring costs or other models. So I just want to offer that, like, if the board wants to make that a discussion point, I'm happy to have that. I just shared with Tom that we've done one software thing and I don't feel like it's totally locked in yet from my perspective.
And I
When
can
you say
argue
we,
against that.
that's the housing task force, or?
The town, so we have now, is it SmartGov by Granicus to use names, which is being used for like a permit and DRB application and the rental registry. But I know we asked about reports and whatnot, and Tom was getting them like on the phone, and then they were charging us money to run the reports, and it just feels like there's still some questions to be answered in my mind.
Can I bring up a comment about CEA enforcement?
Sure.
One of the things that I've witnessed since COVID is because of the overwhelming workload that we'd had and the declining amount of contractors available to do said work, in the permit process, what I'm seeing is projects. When you sell a piece of property as a developer to somebody, there's a 7-year impact on land gains, okay? If you hang on to that property for more than 7 years, you're off the hook. But if you sell your lot to a person within that 7-year period, you usually have that person typically is a primary resident holder. They signed a buyer's exemption. That gives you 2 years from the time you sell that property to build that project out. Because of all these additional cost delays, some of these projects are way behind. And the state hasn't taken into consideration that delay. That time frame should actually be 3 years at least, not 2 years. So what it's doing is it's putting contractors way behind on their obligations, as far as environmental stuff too, because they have to weigh which part of the project to start first when they've got a 2-year window, because the penalties are huge. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know how that's probably a state issue.
Our permits are 2 years. Our permits, of course, always say pending all other permits. But I believe our rule is that if you receive a town zoning permit, you merely have to initiate your project within that 2-year period. You don't have to complete it. And so if it's a house, for example, if you get a curb cut permit and start to put in your driveway, I think you met that standard.
I thought if you started a project in Waterbury, you had 2 years to build it out, and if you didn't, because there's projects like
No.
one
I
that
don't-
usually
I don't
turn
believe
on
it's-
Gutho Road that's been there for 10 years and ain't been done. What happens? Do you refile?
I would note, I think this is a question for planning and zoning staff, and as you flagged, I also think it's an overlap between state and town. And to be clear, I think, like, if there's something that the town can do, I know we have some amount of time and some process for extension. I don't want to say specific amounts offhand, because I don't know them and don't want to be wrong. But
just
if
didn't
there's
know
changes we should make.
How that impacts the enforcement part of it, you know?
I just want to note line 31, beautification. There's an actual for 2025, but that's going to be moved to Public Works. Just not proposing to pay for it out of here, but that's not the roundabout, but that's non-roundabout downtown green spaces. And I do hear a lot about this from folks in town, that there seems to be a desire for more town investment. Part of that is also through revitalizing Waterbury. I think we do a reasonable job of maintaining our green spaces in the downtown, and we hire a professional gardener for that. Sometimes the challenge is, there are green spaces in the downtown, sometimes presumed to be publicly owned when they're not. I think it's just a broader conversation at some point, but I think if, there's no way to solve it without quite a bit more money, I think.
I know, speaking to it from the standpoint of RW, my predecessor initiated an orphan garden program. And we're now trying to recharacterize that as an adopted garden program because there are any number of quasi-abandoned properties that we could take on the responsibility, but we don't have endless funding to do that. And so we're trying to look at it as opportunities for groups to adopt the maintenance of these gardens, and that's starting to take hold in a few cases. And
Every year, Ben and Jerry's gives us an army of volunteers for a day or two, and they're pretty helpful in this too.
I assume in that line item where we discussed in the tree program, adding a bunch of different trees, that wouldn't be in that line item.
Would not. This is really gardens in the downtown.
Okay.
So this is not trees, this
Not
is
trees.
plantings.
Um,
Just as an example, the Main Street project, they put in a bunch of those cedars
Right, the little-
to sort of hide all the boxes, and now they're getting overgrown and need to be clipped and that sort of thing.
Lines 32, which is training/tuition, and 39, which are travel. We haven't spent those actuals this year, but with a new staff person, I feel like those should still be funded what they were last year. And I think those are staff that really benefit from things like conferences, if there's always new ideas out there in that world.
Great.
Line 34, the mapping, that's the increase that I alluded to earlier. And the online, the mapping portion of our website, that brings us to essentially semi-annual updates versus annual, which I think is prudent, because I think that's probably the most oft-visited section of our website.
This is the parcel mapping, I
Yeah.
presume, on our GIS? So do we want a budget for the increase?
It's there at 7756. Sorry.
Am I on the wrong line?
Maybe, because I might be on it.
I was on mapping.
Yeah, sorry,
See?
what did I?
34.
Sorry, let me note that. I think I've got it hidden elsewhere, but not hidden, but I want a budget for the increase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a huge dollar amount, though it's high percentage-wise.
Line 36, dues, CVRPC, which I think is formulaic, and we certainly want to be a member. The dues for Central Vermont Economic Development, we actually did pay 2025 and 2024, but those aren't changing. The software suite, 16K is the estimate, which is, I've got to fine tune that, but that should be base contract plus a little bit of help if needed, but the goal is to lean on the consultant, because I feel like we've paid a fair amount here already, and I think there's some leverage that I want to exercise as the manager to get some services out of them that we don't have to pay for. And then going down further, I do not have a number from them yet, so I highlighted it. Conservation Commission, so refresher for people who may not know it, the town, about a decade ago, created a town meeting day a conservation fund. And so what that means is anything budgeted but not expended stays with that fund. And for years, the budget was $700 and it wasn't always spent, and so we have a fund with a few $1,000s. Conservation Commission in 2025 requested that be increased to $2,650. That was approved. They haven't spent it yet this year, but again, if they don't, it goes into the fund. And I know they plan on asking for an increase next year. I don't recall if they presented that specific number a month or so ago when they were before us.
Yes, yeah, they did. But my question, and I think will be the question of a lot of voters, is if they requested an increase last year, they got it, they didn't spend it, why are they again asking for another increase?
It's a fair question. For now, I wanted to honor a request from a committee and in general put a plug number in. I didn't know the exact.
I'm not quoting their most recent appearance, but at the prior appearance to us, I believe they had a work plan staggered over 2 years that was gonna be this amount plus an increased amount the year after that they asked
Yeah.
for our support for, so I'm wondering if it's just a rollover, like a timing thing, not that they won't spend it, but they haven't yet.
And so-
Again, not speaking for them, I don't know.
So I've got to meet with them and delve into the minutes and try to fine tune that, but I don't recall them asking for 20 grand. I thought it was a modest increase.
And I'll check with Amy, I think she said she might wanna come in anyway, so that can be on the 15th as well.
Yeah, and I've reached out to her. And then again, not reflected in here, but we will likely receive a greeter grant again, but that's money in and out, and the work is done by the Friends and all their volunteers.
So it looks like, when we get to the bottom of the page here, this budget would reduce spending on planning and zoning by 21.2%? Or am I reading that wrong?
Much of that is local option tax that passed through.
But then you have the reduction on net property taxes at 6.8%.
Yeah, well-
Also local option tax, I assume,
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
number essentially.
Yep.
Can you explain why you're saying local option tax?
Last year, they had $50,000 in their budget that was local option tax money to pay for a consultant. I didn't mention it before, may as well flip the page to public safety. I didn't include it in here because I thought if there was a conversation about using the state police, it would likely be on the warning in a different place. So the state police not state police, county sheriff, the state police contract is not changing for 2026. It expires in July of 2027, and so that year will be a challenge because half the year we won't know the cost, we'll have to make an assumption. But you look at the history, it's gonna be a big increase. When you have fixed for 3 years, that's the way it goes. But 2026 we're level. I met with the ambulance service director, and a lot of people probably saw the mailing from the ambulance service. We've had really big increases for the ambulance service, and I've talked about really how, I'm hoping to see from them a plan to get them to stability. And so their increase this year was initially 15-16%. And after some conversation, they feel like they can live with 8%, but their strategy, their revenue strategy, has been related to hiring EMTs, and so they've raised their payroll this year 150 grand, which is a big number for them, but those EMTs give them greater ability to bill, greater ability to do transports, which is where there's more significant money, so with EMTs, they can take more complicated patients on longer transports and bill for that. So the board, the ambulance service board, has approved that. And I think it's a pretty sound strategy. They're also starting to fundraise, and they're trying to work towards buying a smaller ambulance. And part of it is that they need an ambulance that, it's really an ambulance designed for those longer transports. So it's more of think of a full-size van converted to an ambulance. So smaller than the full-size ambulance, something that's gonna be a lot cheaper for them to own and operate when they take longer trips with those EMTs. So they're hoping to get not 6 miles a gallon out of this vehicle, but a little something better. And they're roughly a third of the cost, quarter of the cost of a full-size ambulance. So you'll probably see some community fundraising effort related to that. But nonetheless, there's an increase, and if you look at the actuals, this town spent very little on its ambulance service 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So this has been a huge impact on the budget. I think they're reaching a point of some better stability. I'm sure they'd be happy to come in here and talk a bit about their future.
I think that might be worthwhile. I know there's also been changes. We used to give them space that was credited against the amount we paid them.
Yeah.
And obviously they have their own building now. I had a request for call numbers monthly, and so both, if the board wants to have them in, we can have them in, but also I think that would be, seeing as we get that data for police, I thought that seemed like a prudent, just awareness information for the community.
Yeah, I think with the percentage jump we've seen in the last couple of years with how much we're giving them, I would much like to talk to them.
And part of their history, which really predates me, is that the ambulance service charged practically nothing. And they, in the late 2010s, early 2020s, they had pretty big operating deficits and burned through a lot of their reserves. COVID was a help. The ambulance service got pretty substantial, dramatic even COVID grants that gave them a profit. So I think for those years, I think basically it would have been prudent on their part 7, 8, 10 years ago even to request for funding increases, and they didn't. And I think a lot of change happened at once. I think they had 3 years where they mass need for increases due to COVID, and at the same time, COVID covered everything, but then the wages went pretty dramatically up. That's not even related to EMTs, that was just related to what it took to hire anyone. So I think that all hit us at once, in a way. COVID was the fulcrum, and it all pivoted. So my meeting with the ambulance director, I really talked about, what I think I'd like to see from them is some return to inflationary increases, which I think is perfectly reasonable. So 8% is a lot better than what we've had recently. What we've had recently has been really dramatic. Sure, they'd be happy to come in.
And Tom, was 2024 the last police contract? Or was
Yes.
that the in-between year? I'm trying to track the years and assuming that's partial year, full year,
That was the partial year, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
So 2027 will be the partial year.
thank you.
Just a question, this is kind of old business. I know Waterbury, we were the caretaker, they used to be a Central Vermont State Police Advisory Board. I know I was Waterbury's representative, and we wound up, when it dissolved, be the bearer of a small fund. It's not a lot, I'm sure it's probably, I know it's under $1,000, it may even be under $500. I was thinking just to get that off the books, because it's kind of been sitting there, to do some sort of event for the, police people. We typically have had like a barbecue for the, first responders, and I think that would be, one, to get it off our books, and two, I just think it's always good with our 250th year, give something back to the first responders.
I thought we stopped paying for that.
We did, but I think we were the caretakers of a little bit of a fund. That, basically, the advisory board dissolved, but I think Waterbury got the remaining funds.
Okay.
So it probably just sits somewhere in some fund, and it's probably been 4 or 5 years now.
Okay. I'll look into that.
So it wouldn't be, something, it would be on the budget, but it would be money in, money out.
Yeah.
We're doing the building before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'd like to do the
Move
building.
off? It's
Yep,
about
so
as,
So And I've mentioned a few times, we've got, if you look at line 5 room rent, we've got that in a few places. And the transfers are internal money from library and general government. The auditors have suggested to me that maybe we just kind of kill this fund and embed all these expenses in the library and general government, but it's not a big deal from an accounting perspective to keep it separate.
I like it, it's separate.
You know, the big number that impacts, there's two big numbers. So grounds maintenance, there's some of that is things like gardening out front, and then some of that is things like if we do minor red curb to things like the curbing. But I feel like we always need something there. And then the building maintenance was the number that really it bedeviled us for the winter of 2023, 2024, but the expenses were mostly 24, but we had recurring problems with the heating that winter. And it appears to be behind us. And what Bill Woodruff did was that every office has one of these little controls. And it's a complex system. And so effectively, most of those controls are dead. There's a few master controllers throughout the building, and that just decomplicated the loop of everything. So that's made things a lot better. And then some of the work was just recurring computer and electrical problems that appear to be behind us. Maybe that should have been anticipated with a 10-year-old building now. And I think Bill has gotten really good also at self-diagnosing and knowing what he can do, maybe not directly, but what he can do with a phone call to the service technician to say, here's the error code, we've done this 5 times, any issues if I do X, Y, Z, versus when he calls them in. So I think we're now past it and we're at more of a regional, reasonable place. Line 18, the card access security system, he's taken the lead on that and working through quotes now. And trying to figure that out and get it done within budget. And part of that is, it's not the card access system per se, it's electrical work that may need to happen that goes with it. So I think we're probably in an okay place there. And then, so the card access work is not done, but that was budgeted, approved by the voters, so that will be done in a future year with those funds. And there's likely some insurance money in the form of a grant that can add to that, and then EFUD can and will pay a reasonable share of that bill. Not a huge share, because half of our building's the library, but this is EFUD infrastructure too. So I think we're at a reasonable place with the building. I gotta look at the actuals and correct them. There's weird revenue in the past, and I did the expenses, didn't have time to do the revenue, but that's because we used to budget the debt for the building here, and the auditors made us
That's what I
move
was
it.
wondering, okay.
Yeah.
Do you know the year on that?
We moved it in 2024. We changed the budget, the way we budget for it.
I just meant on the bond, was it 30 years when it was built?
No, it was a 20-year bond. Give me just a second. Municipal building last year is 2035, and the bond is about 200 grand a year.
Thank you.
Goes down a little bit each year because of the interest, but it's with us for quite some time. And that bond, any debt issued through, the bond is through the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank. Vermont Municipal Bond Bank is awesome because it saves us the hassle of going to Wall Street, getting a credit rating, all those things. And we piggyback on the state's credit rating. So despite interest rates being what they are, if we issue 20-year debt today, it's probably a 3.5%. The only one downside is they pay themselves through a cut of the interest. And so You can prepay your debt, you could say, hey, we want to reduce something through the bond bank and pay it through local option taxes. You are not going to save an interest. Once you sign that deal, that schedule is set. So there's no point in ever prepaying it. But it's still a great deal, and it's still a great organization. And then I'd like to just hold off on cemetery. I don't think any numbers are gonna change, but I haven't had that formal meeting with the commissioners. I had an informal one. And then we have a few minutes at least to talk about the warning.
Totally. And again, I'm comfortable with the board. I'm noting you had the one pager, which was capital, and I'm just naming that we're gonna wait on that.
Yeah.
On the building, there's been some talk of repurposing some of the office space in here. Are there any expenses that are anticipated with that?
So, probably, but way too soon. So I went and I presented to the Historical Society, and I said 5 times over, this is not a proposal, it's a supposal, and that I haven't even from the staff perspective gone through Bill Woodruff and measured if things will work. We've just had this idea that maybe things can change. And I think we're just in the kicking around ideas stage. And the Historical Society is, they're reading Dr. Jane's will, which talks about the building, and they're reading the MOUs that were signed between the town and the Historical Society. So I think we're a ways away from that. So we're just kind of at the proposal stage still, and I think that's gonna take some time. And something I've learned is that there's an awful lot of interest in Dr. Jane's office, and it's not just about the exhibits in the office, it's about the space itself.
Yeah.
And so I think if we do anything, it's gonna be, probably 6 months of conversation first to reach some sort of conclusion. And so I don't feel ready to budget anything. I'm also not averse to, moving myself. One thing I've thought about is, I don't think I would be bothered by the noise in the hallway, and should I move out there? Or should we make that a recreation cluster? I'm not, maybe there's ways internally to reshuffle the deck a little bit. My challenge is, I hope to have a rec director starting soon, and that person could sit in front of me, which is fine, I think, but it's a department head with not an office. Could sit upstairs, but then you're alone, which I don't love for a whole lot of reasons. It's just a little bit of a challenge to figure this out. And maybe in the end, there won't be any change. I'm not wedded to any one thing. I'm just actively listening to people, really, and I'm not trying to push my own ideas. I'm just trying to get an education and learn about what might be possible.
Mm-hmm. Seems to me like part of it is about providing some privacy and quieter workspace, and in terms of your office, I'd be a little bit concerned about your need for confidentiality if you're in an open space. And then just wondering if anyone's looked into the costs of just putting into more partitions in front of the planning and zoning spaces, which wouldn't require this big change, which has ruffled a lot of historical feathers. And if we could look into those costs as another option, might be a way to go.
Yeah, I think it certainly could be.
There's a lot of opposition, I know, from, especially, you're hearing it vocally from some of the older people who were on the Historical Society, and they're pretty adamant. And I think there are gonna be other people, I think there are other solutions, walling off the planning and zoning people, changing, but that's kind of seems to be part of the historical trust that was made, and they don't, I'm hearing from the public that they don't seem to just want to be upstairs. So,
And I'm,
and it's a process, it's talking, but I think we should give a lot of credence to the voices out there, especially from those older, historic, society members.
and when I attended the Historic Society meeting, I said 5 times over, I'm trying to be deferential to them, I'm not trying to
Right.
force anything. Maybe I thought I was saying that 5 times over and I wasn't, maybe it wasn't reflected in the minutes, but I just want to
Exactly.
make that clear that I'm just trying to explore ideas, and I don't think exploring ideas or having a conversation should necessarily scare people, but I also don't wanna do anything unless it's a win-win. And maybe there is no win-win.
So I'm gonna
And that's
call this
okay.
conversation for today and appreciate it. I guess my question for the board is, do we have anything we want Tom to do? So just to reiterate, I heard, and again, I think I heard it from Roger, Mike, Tom, we're all hearing that this is complex, this is not a, we're
Right.
doing something tomorrow or doing something quickly. Tom just said it's gonna be 6 months of conversation. Going into town meeting and thinking about our timeline, December to January. Do we wanna ask Tom to do anything specific? Or as of now, we don't have any funding budgeted. We just have the key card from last year as an upgoing building upgrade. Do we wanna ask Tom to look into anything else? Otherwise, right now, he's not proposing anything, given that there's nothing certain on the table.
With this written, I'm trying to, I found it, but then I unfound it.
Okay, while you
What?
find it, Roger had his hand up. So-
Okay. Yeah, I think it'd be worthwhile to just look at the alternative of putting up some dividers within the planning and zoning offices as an alternative that could also be part of this discussion.
I worry that if we budget something, it's gonna make it seem like there's
Right, something's in the works.
something in the works when there's not.
Yeah, I'm not saying budget it, I'm just saying get an estimate.
And I'm just putting out the warning from last year real quick.
Great. Actually, while you're there, do you want to print out local option tax from last meeting, or do folks have it? The printout we did last time with the thing, because I feel like that informs some. I know as you can see, my filing system is not fully organized right
Well,
now.
the pocket of my binder ripped out, so
Oh, I'm
now
sorry.
it's just sitting in my back seat.
Would you give me the opportunity just to make a quick statement?
Yeah, you can go quick while Tom
Yeah.
picks up the printing, but
So I'm curious to know how many years we've been here. The former zoning administrator, town planner, sat in the positions that are there now. What type of complaints by them, if any?
Noise. Just boils down to noise.
Okay, and I guess the need for a new person coming in and without even really spending that much time there, but apparently,
Same, yeah.
yeah, okay.
also note, because the timing was abrupt, I think we have heard noise from another folks. I mean, the rec director used to be in that little nook that currently has office supplies and then moved upstairs for sound and noise reasons. And I think just with new people coming in, it was some of Tom recognizing, I'm not even speaking about that, I'm saying, he goes, okay, so I'm gonna hire someone and tell him your office is alone upstairs is kind of hard. So I think it's just brought the I hear what you're saying, and I just want to say, I know, again, probably 2021, 2022.
So are you
We had
familiar
folks
with
move.
Chris Parsons?
Oh, yes,
Okay, so he does the acoustical,
Yeah.
maybe it's worth having him come in
that's
and
great.
say, what can you do in this space, if anything?
He did the panels in here, if I understand correctly. Yeah.
Yep.
He does acoustical solutions. Has a
Maybe
building
he's
right
the
on
problem.
100. Better than the thing. I'm gonna take the prerogative of asking folks to check their calendars now, because I will say this, we have flown through 4 hours. We have named a lot of things to look at December 15th, and we've said we want something done by January 10th. So I just am feeling like we're gonna need, I think we have our standard January meeting, but I guess if we think it's prudent to do something in December, I feel like let's talk about that.
Well, we have a fifth meeting, the 29th.
The 29th, yeah, we talked about the 22nd and the 29th, so.
Yeah, I thought we said we were gonna do the 22nd and not the 29th.
That's what we did say.
Okay, well then, we're doing the 22nd and not.
If that works for folks.
Works for me.
I mean, I'll be remote, but yeah. Remote, but here.
And again, we can revisit after the 15th I was just feeling like the amount of either departments we didn't get to today or other follow-up.
I think skip one of these. Mark?
Yeah, that is kind of how I understood it.
It's last year's?
Correct.
Last year's, yeah. Correct.
I did not update this from the last meeting. Nor did I print it on the 11 by 17, so.
No problem. I feel like that, and to be clear, I will name, we're at 12:52. We've eaten a lot of chocolate and had great conversation and done a lot of productivity, but speaking for myself, lunch on the sooner side would be good. The two bullets here that I guess, and Tom, I'll turn it over to you if you have things to add, is, so we've done some review of departments tonight, more to come. We have done the preliminary local option tax items. Again, we asked this at the last meeting, but if there's anything to flag, now is a moment. And then Tom printed the warning, and I guess some of the questions were about things like, Tom, you alluded to the sheriff funding. If we don't need to decide this today, so obviously we're gonna draft all the numbers. There's also the question of what items get clumped together on the warning. And again, this is something we're gonna have to work out with Karen based on funding requests from other organizations. But if there's anything people feel like, I think it's really important that this item is on its own. And Tom, you can fill in, I'm off the cuff here, but like there's requirements around, we have committed as a board to say local option tax should be differentiated from the rest of the budget. You heard differing proposals from Bill Shepelek about like Randall Meadow and if that should be with that or not. Again, some of this I'm sure is gonna evolve as we get more information, but Tom, that's my off the cuff. Do you have things to add?
I guess I would add, if you look at bottom of page 2 to the end, Articles 16 through 26. I believe the cutoff is anything over anything under $2,000 in the past, the select board has said lump it into the previous article. I would argue many items in Articles 16 through 26 have not changed for a long time. And perhaps either your dollar amount goes up, or you say, hey, it's been so many years, maybe we just put it in one article or put it in the budget. Entirely up to you. Couple other things to think about. So, something not in the budget, but I've had some conversation about with the natural disaster coordinator and the committee, is how do we budget for floods? Because you can't plan on that. And so, one thought, which may be possible if we think about Randall Meadow differently and get a grant award, is that I think it might be prudent to say, to budget something from the local option taxes for floods, and to, in the same way we have for the conservation fund, create a fund. So if it's unspent, it's there, and then we just have that reserve in perpetuity. And it doesn't need to be a lot of money, it can be a small amount and it can build. So I think that might be a warning item to think about. That could be a prudent use of local option tax funds, consistent with the policy too. How you think about the sheriff's question, if at all, is another interesting one. And then also, another item I want to raise is that there's been some public interest, but one person in particular who's talked about formalizing the housing trust fund through a public question. So there could be a warning item that basically says if those funds are appropriated for the housing trust fund, they can be used for the eligible purposes, but nothing but. So if that occurs and a year from now, there's maybe not a ton of interest in a housing trust fund program, you could, in theory, redesign the programs a bit, or you could, in theory, move money elsewhere. There'd be a lot at stake with how that question is worded.
Sure would.
There's been a similar concern raised about the local option tax, but I think putting that in a lockbox,
Putting what?
putting like the local option tax in a special reserve, I think it, quite frankly, is too constricting for the select board. I think you're there to represent the people, and things happen during the course of a year.
Right.
Budget's not a contract, it's a plan, but if something happens, and whether it's a challenge or an opportunity, I think you need some flexibility as a select board to say that we want to do this with.
Yeah, I'm gonna interject here. So what some voices want is direct democracy, and that's awesome. But then the whole town would need to gather in this room twice monthly and decide on everything. The reason that we have representative democracy is that we elect people who make decisions on our behalf. And so if we move all these concerns to a direct democracy platform, and we're just doing it every town meeting day, nothing will ever get done. Which is why I don't think too much of these concerns, because they're not realistic. You can't put everything to direct democracy. We put what we can to direct democracy, town meeting day, but it's not realistic to put every single thing, every single line item, all throughout the entire year, every single thing we decide we need to spend on to a direct democracy platform. It doesn't work. Which is why I don't really support putting a question that has to do with the local option tax or the housing trust fund on an article for town meeting day. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
I'll say I agree on local option tax, and that I think we've been clear about outlining both the allowable uses of the fund and the proposed spending moving forward. So I think that answers concerns on that. And I would say on the housing trust fund, I actually have no problem. I would have no problem. I think in some ways I'm inclined to say, let's just get a town meeting vote on it. I mean, we haven't even proposed allocating funding to it this year. So it would truly be a vote to formalize the fund and move the money into it. I'm a little worried about the technicalities of how we're defining uses of the fund, and the timeline to do good research on that. I mean, we did really specific guidelines for the Housing Trust Program that took like 3 meetings here, multiple meetings at the Housing Task Force. If we're putting it in a lockbox, my question is like, what's the guidelines to get it out of the lockbox? And we have 2 other housing-related projects that we're considering, and so again, my objection is not, in some ways I wish we could, because, and I mean, we can make the decision, but I would like the public clarity so it's not a recurring issue, because I think both we had appropriate guidance, but I think if we're doing a lockbox, I hesitate about the timing to get that to.
Right, and if you need to make reserve fund and you need language, you have to make it broad. You have to say, to be allocated on advancing affordable housing in Waterbury, right? It has to just be broad.
Right.
Otherwise, it's locked in that lockbox forever, and everyone will argue over whether this is the true spirit of what it's supposed to be spent on or not, and then it never comes out.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if not, and just to be clear, Tom, we're currently like fund accounting it up. It's in the general fund, but allocated for this purpose.
Yeah.
And your guidance is that that's allowable, and the auditors think it's allowable.
Yep. Yeah.
Was that a hand or just an admiring a hand?
Yeah, I was just admiring it. I think part of it is we're voting to authorize the funding, but not saying that the funding has to be spent. And there was a question from the public about whether funding from previous years carries over. And I think, you answered that, Tom. I don't know if we need to get sort of like clarity on that publicly.
Maybe since adopting the policy that there's more comfort with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chris.
So to your comment about the flood reserve, potential flood reserve, I guess that's why I was interested in perhaps doubling that tax stabilization fund for emergency purposes. Now, if you were to designate so much money a year towards flood mitigation,
I'd invest that money.
That's what I'm saying, if you put it in the
Yeah,
tax
100%.
stabilization fund, would you then keep track of how much came out of that line item and went into that tax stabilization fund?
Yep.
And then if there was an emergency, what portion of that would you use? Would you use that plus the gain, or would you just use that and allow the gain to stay in there?
Yeah, it'd be dependent on what happened, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that would be tracked separately and you could build that fund over time.
Yeah, because and I didn't state this before, but realistically, it'd be my desire, and I know this may be a stretch, 100 to 200,000 a year for a total of doubling, another additional million into that tax stabilization fund for future issues like this. And I agree with Alyssa about putting that on the warrant for the, it's a one-time vote, and then after that, if the criteria is in place as to how that money gets used. And my other concern is what happens hypothetically if that affordable housing trust never goes anywhere? How do we undo that without too many complications?
Yeah.
And also, Chris, speaking for myself, I have maybe the same concern about the tax stabilization fund, and maybe it's just how you're using the language, but I guess it'd be a question I have for Tom. Right now, I think we're only supposed to take 5% of that. So if,
Well, you
as
can
opposed
draw
to a
it.
flood reserve, that we could maybe zero. I guess just to me, it's bringing up those technicalities of, I agree with you on the use of it, of wanting to, rainy day fund, put aside money to have. I guess my question is, I will say, my understanding is that tax stabilization fund has a very specific amount we're allowed to take out. So I guess before putting more in, that would be subject to that same percent.
We are allowed to draw it down to no more than 650,000 left.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that was my question of, yeah, okay,
Yeah, that's the way it's set up.
thank you.
One other thing for the warning, and I've got to figure out wording to recommend to you, but the town has a fund called the Veterans Monument Fund, and it was given to the town when the VFW folded some years ago. Monuments are in our parks. It's a separate fund invested,
This is just to maintain monuments.
just to maintain monuments. Some thought has been to go to the voters to see if they would approve combining that fund with the cemetery reserve fund. Because really the cemetery commissioners, in practicality, they've essentially overseen the monuments because it's been the same vendors that clean gravestones as the monuments. It's not a need, but it may just be a way of having a public vote to clarify it, because I think there's some questions about who's in charge of it. We haven't spent anything from it in years and years, but it just might be nice, or even to just clarify that the select board oversees that. But the cemetery commissioners feel like maybe they would be the appropriate group.
What, like, I know you said maintain, what if like a name needs to be added? Is that out of that fund or something else?
That would be,
or-
yeah. We don't charge the fund for things like weed trimming around it, that's all just part of parks
Right.
maintenance budgets.
Where is it right now, did you say, in Parks?
It's just sitting out there in an investment fund. But we haven't in some years spent money on
How much money is there?
I'd have to look up top of my head. Actually, give me a minute, I can dig it up here.
I will know if, go ahead, Roger.
I didn't need to spend a lot of time on this.
Well, my only,
And it's not solving a problem, but I think it's clarifying, so there's not a problem in the future.
I
is
think
all.
putting it in with the cemetery commission, I think makes a lot of sense, because their purposes, even though for any monuments, whether it be a non-veteran or a veteran, I think they would have similar concerns, and I think they would be a good clearinghouse to manage, because we don't want to see, no one wants to see the veteran memorials, degraded. And I think the cemetery commission would be good stewards of that.
If they're willing to take on that
Right, yeah, of
responsibility.
course.
and I know it is then actually, and to be clear, I'm not opposing it for this reason, but actually taking it out of our authority. And if it goes in the cemetery,
Yeah.
right, don't the cemetery commissioners have the jurisdiction over the cemetery reserve fund?
Yeah, and I think we could word that question. I just think it needs clarification of
Yeah.
whose authority it is. It could be your authority, that's fine too. I don't think.
Oh, no,
we'd
to be
object
clear,
that.
I have no objection to combining it with sanitary if they're doing it. I just feel like for the board's full understanding, like, I think there are implications of who then is making the ultimate call on how they're spending it. And again, I don't disagree, they'd be
Yeah.
good stewards if they're using the same vendors and have the same interests, so.
May I just change the subject a little bit from cemeteries and war monuments? This whole budget proposed, what's it raising the tax rate by?
Right now, very preliminarily, it would raise it 2.25 cents, 4.05%, with room to change.
2.05% in the tax rate, is that what you?
2.25 cents, but 4.05% on the tax rate. And I'm hoping that we can chip away at that. Inflation right now, I think, is a little lower than that, 3.5, 3.75.
Yeah, I'd like to work at this to get it down into inflation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always think it's good that we've been really good at trying to have a net zero budget. And I know if it's not capable of getting there, that's something else, but the lowest we could get it close to net zero, I think it's a really good thing, especially in facing, you know, looming large school budget, school tax, you know, increases.
Well, it's they're not giving municipalities a lot of wiggle room here.
I'm not saying it's a goal, not a absolute.
Right.
So 2023,
No, I'm agreeing.
Yeah, I know.
The education budgets are really screwing us all.
Oh, absolutely.
trying to get- ...2024, we were at 2.4% increase on the tax rate. 2025 was a 0. I'm trying to dig up 2023 real quick. I think 2023 was in the range of a couple percent.
Yeah, I think it was a penny for some reason. That kind of rings a bell.
So this would be a fairly significant increase.
But December 7th. So we've got some time to keep pecking away.
And it's closer to inflation. I guess I will just name, like, I am all for, I think we're incredibly responsible and constrained, and having the local option tax is a game changer. I mean, there's things
Yeah.
we can
Oh.
discuss, especially, I mean, I will say I had questions at the 320 for Randall Meadow, and if we have positive potential grant funding, that's putting us in a position to actually execute that project and have a funding mechanism. I mean, that's huge. I will say, I think it's hard, like, inflation is real. So just naming that, like, especially with the upcoming, I do think if we zero it forever, I mean, you saw it with the ambulance,
Right.
they didn't ask for, and again, I'm not saying spending forever, I recognize the sensitivity, I recognize fixed income, but I think continually asking us to do zeros means that when it catches up with us, we have to go really high. So I don't want to go above inflation, but I don't know. The zero to inflation space is always interesting to me because I just worry about us zeroing, and that actually not being prudent because
Oh, I,
we're not keeping up with increasing costs.
no, I know, but if it wasn't for LLT, we'd be screwed.
Totally.
Or you just have worse equipment and roads.
Right, exactly.
Either way, yeah.
I will say I still want to revisit the pool expense, Tom, for
Yeah,
the
we haven't done the
filter
rec yet, yeah, and the filter.
in LOT.
And then a lot could change with LOT with Randall Meadow.
Yeah, I guess, so, yeah.
And are we looking
Revisit
at the
that.
previous two conversations? I know it's still on here, I know probably just hasn't been changed about the tree board request, moving that toward the
Yeah,
expense
and I-
toward the budget, the inventory. To me, I think those kind of expenses, could fit in the budget. I always say I like to have the higher cost things that would have more impact on the budget, be LLT expenses.
That's up to the board.
We can revisit too, Tom, are all capital, no, not all capital expenses are in here, but more could be. I guess I'm curious around that balance between how
More
we
could be.
represent what.
Paving is already a little lower this year. because there's just less in the pipe, and you'll, at least according to plan, see an increase in that budget in 2027. More could be, that'd be consistent with policy, but if you know, the more you move here, the more you lose the ability to bond and pay for it through the
Yeah.
LOT.
Yep.
And I think the voters are gonna like the proposed, move toward using LOT money for sheriff's expenses. I think that's a big one.
And I guess I view that as perhaps something that would be LOT funded for a trial period, and then it would be a base expense.
See how it works.
Pilot initiative.
Right, it's a pilot.
I guess the other thing, one takeaway for me, and I could be wrong, but just based on your reactions, is that if Randall Meadow is moved out, whether it's a one-year plan or a multi-year plan, would you like to consider sidewalk money
Yes.
Yeah.
or some other
Yeah.
private sidewalk?
No, I agree.
Because we could get that done, maybe not with staff, but we could, if you give us money to spend on sidewalks, we will certainly spend it.
And I think what we all hear from the public, things such as speeding, sidewalks and stuff, those are the things that they want that LOT money spent on, not the fluffy things.
Yeah, and I'd just be
Personal.
curious on proposals, Tom. Again, I really heard the efficiency of scale, so if that's the only way to do it, I do think it's hard to go from 0 to 800K is like a big, if there's any way to have a 200K sidewalk option, and again, if that's not financially
I guess
pragmatic, I get it.
I'd be happy to have a broader conversation about Woodruff. From my perspective, the Upper Stowe, High Street, right near the school, if we
Yeah.
could chip away at those.
Oh, I think it'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris and I can argue about the foam.
If we had a bingo card for the budget. All right, do folks have any other major things they want to flag? Again, noting we're at 4 hours right now. Am I doing math right? We've covered a ton. Thank you, Tom, for all the work preparing, especially, we thought it was abbreviated last year and you're on an even more accelerated timeline. So just want to thank and acknowledge that though we didn't review it all, you're already drafting the whole thing and having real conversations. So really appreciate that. Do folks have any other considerations they want to flag, or we feel like all TB to be continued on December 15th?
After these 4 hours, I can offer anything more productive.
Heard. With that, I guess then,
Brain is fried.
I noted, Tom, when you were out of the room, just so our next scheduled meeting is on December 15th. We have a lot to review.
Yes.
Judging for myself in that it took 4 hours today, I think we likely will need another budget meeting. So we all mentioned the 22nd had been the December date
Okay.
we had talked about. I don't know if the board still, the 29th would have been the 5th one, but changing it to the 22nd, I don't know what folks' plans are,
It's fine.
22nd is better.
I can make 22nd work.
as opposed to the 29th.
Yep.
I want to thank Tom for going through the budget the way you did, pulling up each line item by its number, because when Bill Shepluck used to do it, he knew it so well, he just jumped through it, and you had a hard time keeping up with him. I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you, Alyssa, and the board for allowing me the time to make comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. It's nice to have some public. With that then, I would be,
For that, out of curiosity, I haven't been looking. How many people have we had on Zoom?
0. Kenny
Zero.
Ryan left at like 11,
Okay.
sorry, 9:17.
More
He was
curious
on.
than anything.
But we have the recording.
Can I say one other quick thing before I
Yeah.
forget, for the warning? Last 2 years, I believe, tax due date was changed to 5:30 instead of 4:30. I think the first year, we had one person come between 4:30 and 5:30, and none this year. So, from a staff perspective, I'd like to just consider 4:30.
Go back to 4:30?
Was it a pilot program? No, I'm just kidding.
The complaint was, I think my first year here, you had someone who came in at like 4:35 or dropped it in the mail that day, claimed, and he wanted an abatement, and you were in the position of saying, guess what, the voters said this, we don't have the authority to override them.
Right.
Thought it was a kind thing to do, I still think it is, but people aren't availing themselves of it, there's no reason to do it.
Awesome. Well, I think we have ample work to do on the 15th and beyond that, but thanks everyone for.
Motion to adjourn? Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna, I don't know if we've gone over the agenda for the 15th, but I did talk to Rebecca Ellis, who has agreed to join the committee to review potential options to improve town meeting. So I don't know if we want to address that. I'd like to address it before the end of the year, just to get that committee sort of authorized to move forward, to meet. We don't have to do it on the 15th, but at least by the 22nd.
Roger, I would really like to commend you on your commitment to this issue.
Oh. Well, you don't know how thin that commitment is.
I would also just say, I think the best practice for this board, which has not been stated publicly before, but if we want to have a committee, we need a piece of paper with who it is, what terms will be, how long it will be appointed, temporary or long-term, and the scope of it very clearly. I would say my only reservation is not the work itself, which I'm so enthusiastic about, but if anyone is getting confused about what it is and what it means, and is this a covert, given that we're getting closer to town meeting. So just being clear that this is about more engagement with town meeting. So yeah, if you want to come with that description, we could approve the charge. And you had mentioned that at the last meeting, so I do have it in my notes.
What was gonna be the time for the January 10th meeting?
I think.
I think 9 AM, 10 AM. We have the Legion.
Okay,
I think
So
you
the
might have said
12th was gonna
10,
be-
but I have.
so 9 till,
I don't think. I mean, it was maybe an hour plus last year, maybe 2. It wasn't all day.
I think it was like 2
I think it's 2, 9 to 11.
2.
Okay, 9 to 2.
No, 2 hours. I was
Oh,
saying 9
okay.
to 11. I also thought we had said 10 a.m., but I might be wrong for pie time. We also could do potluck. We can re-review the 15th.
Pie.
I mean, some people want the egg. I don't want to be circumventing on rotaries. All right. Tori had a motion. Kane seconded it. Do we have any further discussion or follow-up? Sure.
Yeah.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. We are adjourned at 1:19. Thank you, everyone.